Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 122, our first Wizard World Chicago special. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, Dr. Knowledge on the comics forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. Stop! You must be super cool to proceed. Your life depends on it. But if I start singing, Sean, listeners, everybody, you better run! So says the most excellent sensei of the whatnot, Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
Jim and I are at Wizard World Chicago right now, and we're recording straight from our hotel room on the Iriver. So if there's any sound issues on this podcast, please excuse them. We are portable at the moment, so we'll try to give you the cleanest sound possible on this episode. On this episode, we are going to be chatting about the DC Nation panel that occurred on Friday. We're also going to be chatting about Final Crisis number 2. We're going to chat briefly about a really cool panel with Brian Michael Bendis and Jeff Johns, which involved a lot of other DC and Marvel creators, which was really, really cool. And other than that, just probably random things from the con in an effort to bring you here as a part of the con with us. So this is going to be a very interesting episode, but thank you very much for joining us. We want to thank our sponsor for this episode, InStockTrades.com and DCBService.com. Teen Titans number 62 is written by Sean McKeever, who hosted our podcast panel. Yes, he hosted our podcast panel. I'm inventing new words now. It tells you it's late. That explains why I'm mumbling. Teen Titans number 62 is written by Sean McKeever, who hosted our podcast panel. Art and cover by Eddie Barrows and Rui Jose. It's guest starring Cyborg. When the villains attack, it's up to two remarkable teens to pick up the pieces so the Teen Titans don't have to. This issue, a heartwarming look at the Titans Tower through the eyes of its least known inhabitants, Wendy, Marvin, and Wonder Dog? Regularly $2.99, 40% off, only $1.79. And I gotta say, if you aren't reading Teen Titans right now, I have become a big fan again of this book. It's finally Sean McKeever's getting comfortable with his run. We've seen that with the Terror Titans arc right now that's going on. This is a great time to jump on board Titans if you haven't been reading it. It's a fun book. Just to hear his enthusiasm at the DC Nation panel that we're going to be talking about for Titans is just great. He seems to be having a good time.
Yeah, he's really flexed out the team. He's making it the way he wants to go with it, and it's a nod back to previous creators, back to previous teams, but this is his version of it. If when he first came on, if you're like, I'm not too sure about it, that was like the building of to get to the team where he wanted to go with it. So this has been some really cool story arcs, and looking forward to, and I'm thinking a nice long run.
Yeah, to me, the Future Titans arc, the original one that started, was kind of a bridging arc, where he was putting in a bit of the old to kind of give a nod back to that, and I think to kind of connect with readers who had been reading it all along, and, at the same time trying to get a handle on the book for himself. With this Terror Titans arc, it's like he's unleashed, and he's just having a really great time with the book, so it's one that I highly recommend. Wonder Woman number 23, I cannot rave and recommend this book enough. It's written by show favorite Gail Simone, art by Aaron Lopresti and Matt Ryan. The cover is by Aaron Lopresti. It's the finale of the 4-part End of the Earth's epic. Wonder Woman returns from the darkest corner of the DC Universe, and she's brought something nasty back with her. And will Diana fall at the scene of her Amazon sister's greatest tragedy? You've never seen Wonder Woman like this before. Regularly $2.99, 40% off, only $1.79. We had this really cool signing where we got to see Gail Simone again. I got to get my book signed by artist Aaron Lopresti, who was doing free sketches with signings, which was very, very cool. Very nice guy. They are doing stellar work on Wonder Woman right now. I obviously saw from Top Bullets. It's my number 3 book right now. This book is in my top 5 every month for a reason, because it's just been a phenomenal read. I love what she's doing.
Oh yeah, dude, come on. I think it's a given for both of us that this is a top of the stack book for us, and just loving the look of it, just this great tale. I really want to know what the heck's going to go on with this, man. This is one of those things where you think you get an idea, but you can never guess, because Gail likes surprises, and she likes to hit you with that wham out of left field. What? Oh, cool type of moment. So, yeah.
I love the consistent interconnectivity between previous stories because she's got her own grasp on the character. I love the warrior's respect between when she's in Wonder Woman mode, between the people that she connects with there. We've seen this happen with the gorillas. We've seen this happen out in outer space. I am adoring that about this book. It's what making it to me just one of those reads I can't put down every month. The artwork, though, has been just absolutely gorgeous. If you have not, he started with number 20. If you haven't checked out Aaron Lopresti's work on this book, issue 20 is the perfect place to jump on board. Check out all the issues with Aaron Lopresti because something really special is happening here. Why the Last Man Deluxe Edition Hardcover Volume 1. There's a special discount of this one. It's written by Brian K. Vaughan, art by Pia Guerrera and Jose Marzan Jr., and it's the first 10 issues of the award-winning series written by Brian K. Vaughan. They're collected in an oversized hardcover with a new cover. Regularly $29.99. If you've never checked this book out, see what the buzz is about. It's 50% off, only $14.99. All 10 issues in a hardcover format.
Dude, I hate you. Why'd you have to pick this thing? Now I'm going... Because before I was like, no, then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, man. Because that's just... I really, really enjoy Why the Last Man, and I have the trade. I didn't get the individuals, like I have the trades, and I'm like, I don't need a hardcover, but I'm like, oversized, 50% off. I'm like, that's the price of a regular trade paperback. I'm like, oh no.
Obviously, you've expanded into things like Vertigo and Wildstorm, which you weren't reading when we originally started. So in some of the series that had been more established, you had started grabbing in trades. I remember you were casually grabbing some Vertigo titles, then all of a sudden you started grabbing more and more of the Vertigo line, and you jumped into Why the Last Man. I know with the amount of backlog reading you have that you're probably not caught up now with Why, but where are you in your journey with Why, at least roughly?
I've read through, I believe, 4 trades, and I think I have the 5th one at home, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
That's actually really impressive to me, because with the amount of reading that we're doing on this show, in general, I'm like, you finished 4 trades and you're ready for the 5th one already? Because Why is like a really intense read with a lot of things going on. I can't recommend Why the Last Man enough. And actually, that in itself is a testimonial to it, because not only did you read the first trade, but you got so into the series that you kept reading the other trades to continue on that journey.
I basically read 1, 2, and 3 in one sitting. Now, when I say one sitting, I don't mean I literally went 1, 2, 3, but I read 1. The very next time I had a free moment to read comics, which was later that day, I read 2, and then the next time 3. And I was just like, it literally, that's how fast it just pulled me into the story, wanting to read more. I got 1, 2, and 3 at the same time, or I got 1 and 2 at the same time, and then picked up 3, but I just went right through them. So it's the only reason why I'm not 100% completely caught up is because we got hit with a lot of the big projects we were working on. And I'm like, I'm loving this, but I gotta, some other stuff ahead of it.
That's why I get with trades too when I start reading trade collections. But whatever your bag and boarding preferences or shipping preferences, DCBService.com is your discount pre-order source. You still have time to order Seven Soldiers Volume 2, which continues the Grant Morrison epic. It's a 30-part epic that is contained in 4 volumes. It's 47% off because they're supporting our Book of the Month, so if you didn't jump on this one, now is the time. They also have Why the Last Man, seeing as we're speaking about it, Volume 10. So if you've been collecting this via trade, this is your chance to pick up the last trade, Whys and Wherefores. Yorick Brown's long journey through the earth populated by only women comes to a dramatic, unexpected conclusion in this final volume, collecting issues 55 to 60, regularly $14.99, 40% off, only $8.99. $8.99 to pick up that volume right now. We had the chance to chat with our friends from DCBS and InStockTrades.com at the con. They always have a fantastic booth in Chicago that stands out with just a ton of hardcovers, trades, whether you like archives or whatever. It just goes to show, if that's what they're bringing to the con with them, what is their stock like? Because they seem to have everything. They are great people. Feel free to jump on board their sites for savings. We use the site. Obviously, you can hear from our joy at just talking about them, so I can't recommend them enough. We're continuing to support the Hero Initiative. Got a booth typically at most cons. If you have a chance, go up and say hello to them and thank them for what they're doing to help comic creators. If you go to ragingbullets.com, you can click on the handy PayPal link. Check heroinitiative.org to see if you can do anything to help them out, because they're absolutely wonderful. Gino's East, I cannot recommend enough for deep dish pizza. Jim actually at one point said that he was going to live there.
Okay, here's what I said, and here's what Sean can twist it around. I said, this pizza is so good, I would consider moving to Chicago.
That is not, word for word, that is not what you said. We are sitting outside at the restaurant. You looked at me and you said, this pizza is so good, I would move here.
Here being Chicago. Chicago, not move to a pizza joint, which is where you thought I was going to move to. And, of course, I encouraged that with my comments about what I would use for a bidet and everything like that.
Just because we're not sure if we did it. Straight from the O'Hare Airport, I give you Jim, sensei of the whatnot, Segulin.
Hi. This is your spoiler warning. We go in depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if you haven't read something, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show. I'm tired, and Sean won't let me sleep, or this would have been a lot more energetic.
I personally thought it was just the kind of energetic that we like for our show.
This is a review that I really was hoping we would be able to get notes together and get on this episode. Final Crisis number 2. The writer is Grant Morrison. The art and covers are by J.G. Jones. Alex Sinclair did the colors. Rob Lay did the lettering. Adam Schlagman is the assistant editor. And Eddie Berganza is the editor. And I really wanted to get this one in because it's the big event book. And it's funny, I reread this 3 times now. And it was on this third read that there are certain big elements to the story that click. Jim and I are doing our notes in the hotel together right now. And it's one of the few times you and I have done this. Usually we do them separately. And I was just like, dude, I just saw the coolest thing, and I had to tell you. And we're going to share it with you on this episode. For me, this issue, I ran it first to, I was being confused about certain bits because we jump into Turpin, and I'm like, well, where was Turpin? You know, what happened to Turpin? Because last time we saw him, these little kids were swarming over him, and I was puzzled by that. And there were other parts where I was just like, this is really cool, because we get introduced to a whole bunch of new characters. We see big events with the Trinity and the Justice League in general, more on Orion's murder. We get to see the return of Barry Allen in this story, which is really great. So as this whole story flowed, I'm just kind of doing a general walkthrough as far as where my head's at right now. My first read-through I really liked. It was this third read-through where I'm like, oh my gosh, this may be one of the best miniseries ever.
Oh yeah, dude, big time. And the funny thing is, some of these things, I was three, almost 4 times, and it wasn't until you said, hey, remember this? Hey, I'm like, oh my god, I didn't even notice those things. So I was just like, this was one of those where I was like, when I'm first doing my notes, I'm like, man, it's really cool, and I know the story's going somewhere, but I'm like, dude, you should have given us some more. And he did give us more, and that was the thing. It's the clues and everything that's there. This is the issue that you can start seeing where it's going. You can start seeing the pieces of the puzzle, and it literally took multiple read-throughs, Sean's multiple read-throughs, even Sean's comments, and then there's a couple other stuff I'm like, ooh, hey, I wonder about this, that I didn't tell you that you're going to get a little surprise on.
Cool. Yeah, to me, that's why I was looking so forward to this discussion, because I do think this is a story with a lot going on and a lot being laid out. After reading this right before you and I got to record, I'm convinced this issue was absolutely about as brilliant as you can possibly get. And I urge you, if you're reading Final Crisis, to plan to do a few read-throughs of the issues, unless you're just somebody who happens to catch everything Morrison does right away. And if you do, more power to you. I certainly don't. So this one, it was well worth reading through. The opening page in Japan, Killing Joke cover on the back of the jacket, Kato from the Green Hornet, Stormtrooper references, Ed Grimley, which that's how I took it as, from Saturday Night Live. There's so much more. I loved the constant pop culture references in that opening bit.
And I like the Japanese influence on the different stuff. Like, you have the Stormtrooper, but he's not just a Stormtrooper outfit. There are some Imperial Japanese warrior type references on him you can see with like the horns and the wings that are coming off on the back. You have a Wonder Woman, but it's not Wonder Woman, it's a spin on it. It's a manga style. There's a Hawk there, I'm assuming she's dressed as Hawk. Same thing going on with just a little bit of a twist to it. I like that. I really It was just a personalizing of it.
You're right, taking a concept and making it your own style, and sort of in reverence to those pop culture references and things. I like that. Rising Sun of a Big Science Action, which is kind of the JLA of Japan. I love the whole Japanese monster film basis for the concept. Different location, different villain types. It pulls from film. It pulls from manga and the media focus in Japanese storytelling, which I really, really liked. The older generation is the warrior that's been in the trenches. The newer generation is more concerned with merchandising and gimmicks. Superbat, who is, kind of the voice of the new generation, doesn't argue so much with the things that Rising Sun is saying, but justifies it, which is interesting. It's the transformation of man into merchandising, spirit into toy. Being fantastic is a superpower in itself. Something will happen to put us on the map. I'm guessing that they're going to save the world in their own way. There's something coming to these characters. Morrison would not create these characters without a purpose. I'm thinking either they're A, cannon fodder, or B, they really are going to do something cool where we're going to see them maybe kind of evolve into their own as well.
I'm actually thinking that the kids and or teens of the world will be the ones who rise up and save the day. I'm thinking, because at the panel they said the Teen Titans are going to have their hands full. What if the Teen Titans, the Super Brats, or the Super Young Team, or whatever they're called, rise up? It's going to be the young generation. That's why Mary Marvel, they're saying, is going to play a part in this. I think it's the young rising up, taking because the Trinity maybe won't be able to do it. Maybe the old guard won't be able to do it. It'll be the kids who step up and do the thing.
Well, we see in this one, Batman's being taken out of action. So is he the only one? We're seeing piece by piece, and I have some theories on why they took Batman specifically. So that's, and as we get to those particular segments, it's a good time to talk about.
Another thing I got to really comment on, just this, it's a 2-page spread layout, the scenes where Rising Star is talking, and the layout, the breakdown is almost kind of like a sun crest, if you will, where he's the one center panel, and then there's these other broken down, divided images that it's like
sequentially
surrounding him. And I noticed, I was like, oh wow, that is kind of like a sun ray or rising sun type thing.
Whenever you have these kind of debates, it's kind of the age-old debate, between the old generation and the new generation, who is right and who is wrong. Usually there's a misunderstanding in there on both sides of the equation, and I really like that that's probably going to be explored here. Of course, the whole debate ends when Sonny Sumo shows up. Superbat shows awe and respect. This is obviously a hero. We're not worthy. Sumo is all props and respect in the way he carries himself. The way he talks, water, ice, in a tall glass. Very short, very simple phrases, but that this guy means business. Classic Kirby creation from the Forever People. Now, Mr. Sumo, as I like to call him, since he punched the heart out of Mega Yakuza, was kind enough to warn him that he only fights with money, so back off. And again, Mr. Sumo, Yakuza was a moron, and Mr. Sumo obviously has a rep. Why would you provoke this guy?
Yeah, and not only does he just give him a warning in saying, I only fight for money, it's, I only fight for money where there are rules that prevent me from killing you. Dude, you had it coming. You asked for it. You did deserve it. And Chunk rips out the heart and then just sets it in his glass of ice water that he was previously drinking. I was just like, outstanding.
Everybody knows that friend of yours or that person of yours is an acquaintance that, just by egging them on, you can get them to do dumb things. Enter Atomic Lantern. Mega Yakuza tried to roast him like a chicken. I'm talking about Sonny Sumo. Not such a good time to follow him to the restroom for an autograph. I mean, he ripped a guy's heart out and stuck it in a glass. I'm not saying right now, hey, great, let me get a signing. But how much do you want to bet that there's a certain element of truth to this? I'm assuming comic creators, and not just comic creators, anybody who's in the public eye or, has a fan base or something like that is going to get somebody who at an awkward moment is going to ask them for an autograph or a picture or something like that. We were lucky enough to have breakfast with Gene Ha and our good friend of the show, Art Lyon. Art called us up and said, hey, guys, let's get together for breakfast, which is great because, you've heard episodes with Art on our show where we've talked about his work, and he's our Smallville MVP. So because of that, we had a really nice breakfast. I bought specifically for this purpose, another copy of JLA number 11 with the variant cover done by Gene Ha. specifically for the purpose. What are you laughing about the airplane in the background? Yeah. It's like, if it's not a lawnmower, if it's not motorcycles going by, it's going to be airplanes from the hotel room. It wouldn't be a Raging Bullets episode without some bizarre things in the background. I wonder how much that'll come across, though. At that point in time, even though I bought that issue for that purpose, I am not in the middle of breakfast, or even at the end of breakfast, going to hand him a book and ask for him to sign it. It's just not an appropriate time. There's certain places, like where they actually have a table set up, for example, where they would do a signing, or there were so many times at the con where there were specific creator signings. That's the appropriate time to do that. And I wasn't about to derail our breakfast with that type of thing. So it was funny. It was so... Timing was so perfect because I was thinking to myself, I'll bet you that actually happened to Morrison. Again, if you leave a heart on the table, you're going to have a safe private bathroom experience. Shiloh Norman is a Kirby creation used in Seven Soldiers by Morrison. It's so cool to see how he's presented here. Celebrity status for his high-profile escapes. We've seen with daredevils, escape artists, magicians, etc., throughout history have this kind of status, like your David Copperfields, things like that. But let's go even further to more pop culture today, your Jackass guys. Those movies have bred a couple movies. It had a television show and all that. They do all these crazy stunts and things like that, and, people will tune in and watch them. Everybody knows Johnny Knoxville. Look at that now. He's a movie star because of his role on that. So this Shiloh Norman bit, I'm like, this is so today. This character, the way that he's presented and revered is very much in line with things that we're seeing in today's medium. And I liked that aspect of it. Atomic Lantern is really lucky that he didn't wind up one spectacular burnout light bulb with all the pestering because he stayed there. Sumo got distracted by Shiloh and the pinging mother box. Mr. Miracle reveals that a cosmic war happened. Evil won. He'd like them to band together to create a team. And I do say this, I think Atomic Lantern, Superbat, and that whole crew is somehow going to get in league with Sumo and Mr. Miracle. And I think that might be part of the turning point that we're talking about here. I don't think it is just going to be, in my eyes, it's just going to be the young heroes, but I think the young heroes are going to play a major role in this, in the sense that they're going to band together with more established heroes who perhaps will need that kind of backup because major players are being taken out of the game. They can't just go to the Justice League, for example, because members of the Justice League are going to be taken out of action in this. We've seen, in this issue alone, we've seen characters like John Stewart and Batman go down. But I don't think they're going to be the only ones.
Something I'm noticing now that I didn't catch before, Atomic Lantern has the Green Lantern symbol all over his costume. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, kind of cool. We got the Super Bat for the one guy. Now we got another Green Lantern. I'm betting if we start staring at the other ones, there'll be other references to the JLA in them.
Did you read the sketchbook, or did you just look at it?
Looked at it and enjoyed the images. Then I kind of skimmed the read. I didn't do a heavy read.
If you want more details on this group and their creation and what Morrison and crew were trying to do and why their costumes are an homage, like you were caught, I can't recommend enough the Final Crisis sketchbook because the anecdotes and the little notes on the side show the creation and what they were going for, which is exactly what you mentioned. So you'll see those elements in almost all of the characters, and I think that's called the Super Young Team, if I remember correctly. They don't really reference the name. That is what they were going for here. Nix is going through the dictionary trying to find the magic word to take him home. I love that his co-worker accuses him of being a stoner when she is the one who asked him if he dreamed in color. And that to me seems, I've never asked someone that.
Oh, dude, I have all the time. Just when you're talking about dreams. Well, my guess is somehow dreams got mentioned, and she just made a comment, hey, do you dream in color? Mm-hmm. And he just went off on this rambling on what it was. And that's, you got to think about it. He probably didn't have the most clearest voice saying, well, I believe in dream. Here's my previous dream. I did this and that. And it was probably more of a, hey, and then I did this, and then I saw these things. And I would say is, okay, what are you smoking, buddy?
I still think the dream in color thing adds her to that little element as well. But being judged by super people who built a machine made of parallel universes, they sentenced me to some kind of exile on Earth. In fairness, comics used to have these ads in the back for hovercrafts that you can make out of vacuum cleaner motors. And I would look at that stuff, I'm like, oh, wow, that would be so cool. I could float down the street. Not obviously this was a thing that it would float off the ground. It wouldn't hold any type of weight at all. It gave me that kind of nod. Nix isn't the only one out there.
They can hold up to 80 to 90 pounds of weight with a vacuum cleaner motor. If you go with a larger motor, you can make it actually to hold men and people the weights of a couple men on a platform. And I know that before you ask.
I was going to ask, how the hell do you know that?
I know that from watching Junkyard Wars. TV show is over in England. It was in America. They brought an American version over where they had the team make a hovercraft. And you can actually do this with regular household stuff, and I don't know the exact recipe. I don't know how to do it, but I have seen it, and I've always thought, man, that'd be kind of cool to build.
It'll be interesting to see where and when he'll discover the word and what it is. We're seeing him drawing images of the other monitors, including Midge, a.k.a. Solomon. Any predictions, Jim, on what you think his magic word is, seeing as you seem to enjoy that?
I don't think he has a magic word, to be honest with you, but if he does... Because he's just thinking that he has a magic word. Because he doesn't really know who he is. He thinks he's this, I guess, college kid who's working at a burger joint. He doesn't realize that he's Nix Utopa, or whatever, however it was pronounced. Uton. So he's just like trying to figure this all out going, and he knows something. That's why when you see the sketches of Midge, they're not exactly Midge. Midge has a red face. He's got yellow eyes. He's a little bit more demonified if you kind of can see the corner of the mouth. So it's like this image he has of this, SOB that did something to him, but he doesn't know who it is. So he's just trying to fill in the blanks and figure it out. I don't think he actually has a power, but if it would be, Monitor would be the cheap answer. I don't know what could the other things be.
Multiverse, Ori, anything like that. I don't know. It's real interesting because I agree with what you're saying to a certain extent, but he believes it enough to be carrying around a dictionary going through alphabetically. So that leads me to believe that he's a lot more sold on this than somebody would be waking from a normal dream.
To be honest, I'm wondering if the guy's probably even thinking he's losing his mind a little bit because he thinks the dream is so real that he's like, man, I gotta try this. There's this something in me is telling me this is true, and I gotta follow through. Now, we're talking power words. What if it's the name of that female monitor he had the relationship with?
Interesting. That would be an interesting point, too. I would imagine, though, that they would, would they try to hide it? Would they bother, assuming that he wouldn't get it? I don't think so much that he's afraid he's losing his mind, only because he's embracing it so heavily. He's drawing, he's got a dictionary, he's searching for the word. I don't think he thinks he's crazy. I think that the people around him think he's going a little loco. Typically, if you think you're going crazy, you are going to have a certain amount of avoidance. At that point in time, and you're going to reference the fact that you think you're having issues, at least even internally.
Well, I don't know. There are some people that embrace the craziness and go, hey, if I'm going to go, I'm going to go with a smile.
All right, fair enough. These were the bits on my first read-through. I was really confused because where we saw Turpin last issues trying to track down the kids, found them at the Dark Side Club, and a whole bunch of demon kids were going to, look like they were going to have him for lunch, which actually, isn't that how we got on our subliminal cannibalism bit? But he survived last issue and is shown still trying to track them down. It leads him to the Mad Hatter. This is a great bit that we learned that the Mad Hatter made the prototype mind control devices. Darkseid would have obviously made some changes of his own at this point. The whole bit as I was going through, I was trying to figure out, is he going through frustration? He liked the whole feel of the fight. And he's like, what's going on with me? What am I doing? And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what's been done to this guy? My first thought was that they somehow brainwashed him. And as the issue goes on, there's a certain point where it clicks for me what really is happening here with Turpin. And it was like everything connected all of a sudden, and I saw connecting threads with this, what happened with the Alpha Lantern, and you actually cleared something up for Good for me, because I was assuming Good was the new G. Gordon Godfrey, and now I'm thinking what you were thinking for Good, which we'll talk about as we're getting there. Blood is everywhere. Not only does he like the sound of Hatter's breathing through the broken nose, but he threatens to brain him with a toilet seat. And first I was thinking this is anger over the little kids, which I do think there's part of that, because we are getting Turpin's commentary in here as well. I liked this journey in particular because we're as confused here as Turpin is. When it eventually clicks, it's like, oh my God. But I really liked the way that this was presented by Morrison, because it was great to... Turpin, I mentioned in the first issue, for me, was a very much the old guard who was giving us a view into this world, and we're seeing that still, but we're actually now sitting there next to him and going on his journey with him.
Tell you this, the artwork on these pages were just absolutely amazing. There's the one scene where, Turpin's sitting, he goes, who knew the sound of breath whistling through smashed cartilage could be such a turn-on? Most of his face is covered in this dark shadow. He's got the exhale smoke from his cigarette, and it's just this really just nasty look. And I was just like, oh, cool. That is just a boom, powerful moment.
I like that he seems to imply in his commentary, too, that he feels like he's being impulsive, leaping into the lion's den. I think he mentions diving into hell as one of the things. He somehow knows what's going on around him is bigger than him, and he can't completely explain what he's doing at the moment and what direction he's heading in. John's memorial under the green bubble was important for a variety of reasons. The eulogy where Clark shows that he has so much in common with this character. With the way things have happened with DC heroes, he hopes for a resurrection. I liked that concept that the heroes acknowledge the fact that, hey, we got Hal and Ollie back. I'm praying, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that maybe there will be an opportunity for this with John as well.
These panel, once again, it's the same... a full-page spread, but it's kind of has the panel breakdowns, which, I don't know, I like that. It just, for some reason, as I'm looking at it, I'm like, that's a cool thing with the breakdown. Two, I loved his reference to, we'll get Pray for a Resurrection, because first thought that popped in my head was, of course, Black Lantern Corps. Are we going to see a John Stewart with the, not John Stewart, sorry, a John Johns with a black ring? Who knows? That would be one of those wow moments in the fight. And plus also, it was an interesting thing that Gail said how good thing I believe in reincarnation.
Oh, at the panel.
What she said at the panel. And I was like, I wonder if that's even another clue as long with this. Who knows? It's one of those things I was like, man, that's kind of neat.
Because the question came up from an audience member asking each of the people on the panel what they thought. And I think it was more, rather than her revealing it, I don't think it was her revealing anything. I think it was their own speculation as readers of the particular story. One of the things I liked about The Shield was, considering the fact that a hero was murdered, if you're going to all gather in one place, you're going to want to make sure you're protected in that place. I liked the security aspect of the way that was all handled. Like, we are in full red alert mode. Even though we are honoring the dead, we are making sure that as a squad, we are protected while we do that and while we honor this person.
And that was also for an atmosphere that they could breathe in, And that, for me, was the thing I liked, the fact that, because the lantern rings are based on concentration. Mm-hmm. So John Stewart, because he was the only one shooting up the ring, shooting up the bubble. And you gotta just say, wow, kudos on it, impressing on that you can maintain your concentration. We've all been to funerals. It's a tough time for anybody, especially someone that you're really good friends with who was brutally murdered. This was an execution, and just for him to be able to focus and keep the clarity on that really just shows high praise and compliments to John.
Not only did they kill a heavy hitter superhero, though, but a god was killed quite recently. They don't know at this point if they're connected or not, and that would be something where you definitely want to protect yourself. I liked just the whole mood and atmosphere and everything was set wonderful. To me, in particular, one of the moments that I thought was really in character was Hawkman's reaction. I respected it the most because he stayed in the back, clearly worried that he was in the front, all the focus would be on him and his awesomeness instead of remembering John. And I really respected him for taking that step to recognizing the importance of being a little further in the back of the line to really let the focus in the moment be where it was supposed to be. In all seriousness, I actually really thought the whole thing was done well. So I'll stop with the joking about that.
Dude, man, you were sad. You know, I didn't even make a Hawkman. I didn't even pull a Hawkman joke or comment out of there. I could have said something like, yeah, well, good usage of Hawkman. He's mostly hidden by a Hawkgirl, you know, or something like that. And I didn't, because out of respect for the dead, man. Come on, show a little class.
That's what I'm saying. He was showing nothing. You've got my point exactly, and you're feeding into it. It was nothing but class for him to step into the back, because this wasn't about him. It was about something more than him, and I really liked that about him. That just shows the kind of character that he is. The debate with Libra continues as we shift scenes. Luther is still not convinced, and I'll watch that a little bit. I think in some ways it's his ego. He doesn't want to take a backseat to Libra. If Libra's going to be in control now, and we see this from Clayface and even Vandal Savage, who is kind of wavering and saying, you know what, if he keeps things a little bit more interesting, he might pull off something that Luther couldn't, and Luther would not be able to stand that. He's teaming with Savannah and hoping to get others to stop Libra. And he doesn't strike me as being content in any way, shape, or form to being the right-hand man, even to being the partner on any level. He's always got to be one step up. He's got to be running the show, pulling the strings. And honestly, he's the type of guy, if I were running a squad, he's the guy I would be watching at all times, because he is the one that's going to stick in the knife and turn it the first chance he gets to put himself in the top position.
For me, this was a classic Luther moment, because he's sitting there saying, the Martian was an easy target. You heard Superman, I'll maybe consider. And by that little statement right there, he got Libra to do what he wants without making an agreement, without joining the crew, without any other obligations to Libra at all. He just said, perhaps I will think about it. So now Libra's going to do his wish without any cost or any repercussion back to Luther. Classic Luther moment.
But Luther's also realizing the sheer power of this character in general and saying, this guy cannot be left unchecked. Because if he really rallies all these people together, he's going to become unstoppable, and I need to get him. Luther, one of the great things about an intelligent person like Luther, we talked about whether or not Luther was in character for the last issue, and sometimes Luther needs to step back a little bit, analyze the situation before making his play. Luther's starting to make his play right now. He's starting to set up the cards, hopefully in an attempt to keep Libra from gaining too much power. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and what Luther actually does during this whole thing. What do you think Libra is doing or asking for from the Human Flame? Because that's a really creepy moment. He implies he's working for Darkseid, which, I mean, that's what I totally caught from that moment. I'm a little worried for Human Flame in that particular moment.
Na 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 na, na 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 na, hey hey hey, goodbye. See ya, Flame. Nice knowing ya. You're a good plot twist. Now you're toast, dude. No pun intended.
Either that or he's going to evolve in some way. I don't know if I necessarily think he's going to be gone from the storytelling, but I think that something significant is going to happen to him to either change him or something.
Yeah, he's probably going to become one of the possessed individuals, or I don't know what something going to happen to him where it's not going to be Human Flame anymore. And the one thing I really do got to comment on, again, artwork of Vandal Savage. I just this panel where he's sitting there talking to Luther, and they kind of have the close-up of his face. You can see some of like the Cro-Magnon in him, some of the primitive caveman, but you also see the refinement overlaying it. So it's really just, I don't know, he's just a cool character that I want to learn more about, and I want to read more stories and adventures with him in it. Because you think about it, the guy is immortal. He's been around since the dawn of time. He's seen empires rise and fall. This Libra is no different to him. He's like, well, it's a distraction. Okay, he keeps life interesting. Sure, I'll maybe hang out with a little bit for him.
We shift to the JLA at this point. The big three are analyzing the situation. John is a huge tactical loss. With the interconnectivity through telepathy, he's sought on revenge, and I liked this because it tied it into Salvation Run because of the fact that he was Blockbuster. But Batman thinks there's a link between this and Orion, and I love the detective work in this issue from him. This is something that, not just in this event, as the story continues, we see more of Bruce's detective work and what he brings to the table. They are currently speculating. I like the fact that they're quiet down the second that the Alpha Lantern comes in. They check to see who is coming. They realize that got to be careful who you talk around in this particular situation?
I tell you, it was funny. When she first came on the scene, I really liked her. It was just I thought it very appropriate the way she was written. She was a ball buster. She was giving Hal Jordan a lot of slack about the fact that he's not spending significant times on his other planets under his assignment. He's not just assigned to Earth. He's assigned to his space sector. There are multiple things there. He needs to be keeping an eye on all the planets at once. And it was just one of those things where you get the officer on deck, ching, 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 kind of got to keep in line. You got to stow the line. You got to do what's right. And she has no respect for the Justice League. She sees them as a crime-fighting club. I was like, oh, man, she's just coming across as a Class A1, which I kind of dig, considering we see the Alpha Lanterns. There's a lot of question of who, what's going on with an Alpha Lantern.
Funny, in my second read-through, though, I started to notice that, is she interfering with the investigation at this point? Knowing the information. And it is worth this one. If you only read this once, that's crazy. Go back through and reread it multiple times. Just because there's so much setup in this that you don't really see until you've read it through again. In a good way. But I liked Hal's comeback to her, saying that we got a dead god here, dead celestial. Earth is a place where there's a lot of trouble happening, which is why my focus is here, because this is where, the events seem to be happening, and as an officer, I need to be patrolling this area the most because we are a nexus point of all this kind of nonsense. Alpha Lantern wants to examine the body ASAP. Batman is onto something with the Bullet. He's having the crime scene re-examined. It's interesting that he's taken out of the game before he can connect all the dots. And I'm thinking that's the reason he was taken out of the game. He was targeted by the Alpha Lantern, and that becomes an interesting dilemma.
I have two theories on this. One is because he is the investigator and they needed to take him out because they didn't want these heroes figuring out what's going on. But two, if you recall from the Lieber scene, Clayface said, hey, Luther, back off, because he was giving Luther grief about not supporting Lieber. He's like, I'm next on the wish list. Don't mess up. What would Clayface's wish list be? Take out the Bat. So I think that's part of a combination there.
Totally agree with you, 100%. But I thought it was very interesting that the timing of when he was taken out had to do with as he was getting close to revealing what's really going on here.
Another quick thing, you mentioned how you're thinking Kraken is trying to just break apart the investigation, and a couple things clicked. One, she immediately leaves there when she finds out that John Stewart is on the scene. So she's like, and she's like, it goes, but she also dismisses Hal Jordan, saying, I think your shift is done here. Kind of get him away from the JLA, and which we'll later see would be get him away from an alibi.
She takes out the two heavy hitter Green Lanterns in this particular issue as well and shuts them down. John is searching for the Bullet when another Lantern arrives. The Bullet has been buried for 50 years in the past, adding to the puzzle. His ring's issuing a warning over the radon energy, but gets cut off before it can fully explain, and he's all of a sudden attacked by green spikes. The Lantern who came to help him attacks him. Here's an important moment that really was a major clue for me. John breaks free with his fist and hits the hand of the other Lantern. And this right hook is revealing later, during Batman's detective work, the identity of this Lantern for real. Hal's segment is also part of this reveal, as he's accused of killing not only Orion, but attempting to kill John Stewart because of this evidence that all of a sudden, John was attacked by another Lantern. And, parallax is used as part of that. The interesting thing I noted here is something that's been building in the Green Lantern books. The Alpha Lanterns, with their power source, they are superiors to these, even to the Lantern Guard, Hal Jordan and John Stewart. So these Honor Guard Lanterns now are taking a back seat. Their rings can be shut off. It leads to the problem. What happens when a Alpha Lantern goes rogue? You've now got this Lantern who can turn off everybody.
Yeah, that was definitely a kind of interesting thing to see, that, one, the shutdown, but two, just some of these images throughout this, the John Stewart fight, if you want to call it that. One, I like how he's using like Tonka toys to dig up the concrete. He's got the Tonka scoop there, and the truck, and it just really shows just who John Stewart is. It's he's the architect, so he would know about what a backhoe looks like, and the dumpster, and all that stuff. Two, I gotta say, he gets nailed, spikes to a wooden crate and is able to rip basically his body off of this thing. That was just a cool, huge moment of just, a hoorah kind of, fight there, because you think about it. If you've ever, been stuck onto, anything and you just, rip yourself off, you're doing damage to yourself. You got to exert the force, and it was just, I was like, yeah, John.
It adds again to the concept, though, the Green Lanterns have this willpower. There's a special type of person that is worthy of a ring. And I really liked that particular moment. As we get back to Superman and Batman, they debate over Hal and Kraken. Bruce believes Hal based on the evidence, which Clark does too. And I like they both reveal those thoughts in a very different way that is very true to their characters. Clark makes an excellent point that if Hal isn't the killer, that means we've got a god killer still on the loose. Clark has to leave to maintain his secret identity, and it does make sense here. At first I was kind of irritated by that whole thing, and then as I started to think about it, I'm like, well, okay. If Clark Kent disappears all the time, every time, even Lois can't come up with excuses for that. He needs to make appearances on the job. He needs to have articles present. A major thing has just happened with the Martian Manhunter, and I liked how that all played out. I liked Bruce's reaction, though, because Bruce was like, this is not the time to go. Superman, it's not the time to go. But I think, by the same token, his secret identity is a little bit different and a little bit more, in many ways, a little bit more flexible than Clark's.
Yeah, he can sleep all day, disappear on a whim just because he is Bruce Wayne, because he's the billion-dollar playboy, so he can get away with it. And it was one of those things where I was like, I kind of liked and disliked. I was like, but in the end, the fact that it ties into a later plot story, I was okay with it, because definitely Clark had to be there at that point later in the book, so he needed to be in the Daily Planet.
But the article he was writing was John's obituary. He wanted to write to properly honor the man. Mm-hmm. So I do think there was a lot of layers to the reasoning behind why Clark needed to do what he did. He needed to be a part of that. Probably you need to write big articles, emotional articles, ones that really show who you are if you're going to maintain your job at a major metropolitan newspaper. So I liked that whole bit.
Another thing I'm noticing, after Clark leaves off, Batman comes back down to talk to Kraken. They're really preventing Orion's body from dissipating and going back into the source wall and all that. Once again, another sign of Orion, who was the New Gods, heavy hitter for the good guys, is being prevented from breaking down. Good power play on Darkseid's part.
His breaking down, though, to me, would be something that would be a good thing for them. Because I've got a theory, and I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on this one, on a possibility that's being opened up here by the ending of the book that I think might be an issue. I mean, for example, they aren't preventing all the other New Gods from decomposing. They let them all go into the source. In Orion's case, this might backfire a little bit, I think. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Because, I mean, if you take a look in the picture, Orion clearly is decomposing in there, and Kraken even references it. She's again trying to pin the parallax thing, going back to something, why wouldn't we be talking about Kyle Rayner? Why wasn't Kyle Rayner who most recently was Parallax, the one who was the killer, if we're going to use that? The real Kraken fights back, and this is where we start to see what's really going on here. Her brainwashing was what I thought first, or the Mad Hatter's mind control, but then all of a sudden everything clicked to me. She's not alone in there. There is another mind inhabiting her body that is more dominant. We see John's ring print on her hand, which is the reveal that she was posing as the other Lantern, and John's right hook burnt that into her hand. Bruce realizes this during the issue. Again, more great detective work, calls for a black alert. She knows Dr. Midnight will make it first, but he's going to be way too late to do anything to help Bruce. She waited till Superman left. Wonder Woman was helping John so that she could take down and capture the one person who was starting to connect what was going on before Darkseid would want that to happen. She is being controlled by Granny Goodness and takes Bruce away in a boom tube to be tortured, brainwashed, some combination of the two, not entirely sure.
You gotta love it. The fact that, Batman is smart enough to, one, realize what's going on. This is one of those things I didn't notice until you said something, and I gotta give you full credit on that. I didn't even notice. I'm like, oh, yeah, of course, cool. I figured out what had happened on my own, but I missed the evidence that Bruce had. So that's just a cool catch. And two, you gotta love the fact that Batman, being as intelligent as he is, naturally calls for backup. And get me back up now.
Yeah, but he let his biggest backup leave. And the backup didn't arrive, whereas Hawkman would have pulled out a mace and beat her down because he doesn't need the darn backup.
Yeah, I'm beating a dead horse here, folks. Okay, this is from episode 1 of A Calling for Backup, and it's still going strong, and it will continue on. But on a serious side,
but in fairness, at this point, he called for backup and he was taken away in a boom tube.
True. But in a serious side, though, this scene where she's actually calling for the boom tube is just an absolute amazing. I was like just really caught off guard with all the greens, the blues, the purple, all these colors, and they're kind of like swirling and dancing around her. It was just a real huge kudos to full art team on this one, especially a lot of panels throughout the thing, but this one really, I was like, wow. I stopped and I looked at this one, and every time I see it, I always say, wow.
And all kidding aside, the Bruce moments with the strategy and the master strategist immediately jumping into action and planning out how to try and counter a situation where he's clearly being outplayed. I mean, he is going up against an Alpha Lantern. This is the type of power that can shut down a Green Lantern. So he knows right now, I'm in over my head, I need to get some team members here. I agree with you. I think that was a wonderfully well played out moment, and it was handled quite well. It actually, to me, him calling for the backup, him starting that strategy, showed the dire nature of this moment, that this is big, this is bad. As we go into Bloodhaven, we see the Atomic Knights making an appearance here, and Turpin is called over by Reverend Good. This is where it clicked for me. All of a sudden I was like, oh my God, Darkseid is inside Turpin. This is why Turpin was so confused. He couldn't place where he was. He obviously woke up somewhere and, couldn't remember the events in between, and similar to what we don't see on screen. We don't see what happened to him post the kids coming over to him. So at that point, some point in time during that, Darkseid, who was complaining about his body falling apart and things like that, jumped into a new host.
Yeah, this is just a cool segment as he's going through there, because you got the confusion, and he runs into the Reverend, Good, who, as we said, we don't know if this is Desaad. Is it Good? I kind of like the Desaad angle, because you start to see him later on. He has that Desaad role, that little snarly little worm, but he also, when you see their death factory, he's the one in charge of it. He's the one in charge of the prisoners that they have there, that they're making into slaves. It's a very fitting kind of Desaad role for him. But this one panel here, where Desaad, Good, whatever you want to call him, Reverend Good, whichever way you want to call him, is talking to Turpin. They do a close-up on his face, and once again, it's another half shadow across the face, but then on the other side, they're starting to show some of the cracks and the creaks and whatnot that make the Darkseid face. So it's kind of like he's taking on the appearance of a Darkseid.
One of the reasons why I don't think it's necessarily Desaad, and I might be wrong here, and I'll be happy I've got no problem with it being Desaad, because I can see the possibilities with what you're seeing from it. Anybody who read the Legends miniseries or knows any of the Kirby history, there's G. Gordon Godfrey, who is like a cultist leader who worked with Darkseid. That's in the Fourth World Omnibuses, you'll see it there, in DC Legend. This is a character who has been long associated with Darkseid, that this role almost totally fits. His preaching on the TV screen, that's G. Gordon Godfrey to a T. So I'm wondering if this isn't perhaps the new version of that character. I'm not entirely sure, though, and I can see it your way as well because of the way that he's talking. But I love this. Oh, great one, I knew I'd find you here. He reveals that Darkseid's son, Calabac, is having a new body created for him. Inside the Commandy bunker, we see Commandy. Turpin is absolutely outraged when he sees him, and Good tells him that they are destined to become subhuman degenerates, living, breeding joylessly, and dying in agony to serve the eternal, all-consuming fire pits. And just when I saw, we've got Alpha Lantern is Granny Goodness, Turpin is Darkseid, Good is either Desaad or Godfrey, Bruce is being tortured or brainwashed. He yells a warning to Turpin and tells him to get to the JLA and warn everybody before it's too late. What is the green goop that's going into his helmet? My first thought is Gatorade. Are they trying to overdose him with electrolytes? But,
well, actually,
I'm kidding.
I know you're kidding. Now, I'm wondering, the new body for Calabac, is it this tiger thingy that's on the bench, or maybe is it Batman? Maybe that's what they're doing. They're prepping Batman to become Darkseid's son.
They said they created a new body for Calabac, which I'm looking on the table, that's being created.
Yeah.
So I'm taking what's on the table as being created as Calabac. I'll have to look back in the sketchbook. The sketchbook, they have all these characters laid out. So, and that's why I'm part of me is thinking that Good is Godfrey, the new version of Godfrey.
To be honest, I can completely go with that because there's somebody else here. He's got like an orange and black kind of face, and he's like, "Rejoice, the evil factory is open for business."
That's the two people that, if you look on the previous page, that's the two people that he references,
Mr. Simeon and Mr. Morcari,
That's who he's referencing there. And then they're there with Granny Goodness. Unless, and part of me thought, what if one of them is Desaad? I don't know.
Oh no, I know who Desaad is. Desaad is Libra.
Libra's Libra, dude. I love all these theories that Libra's somebody else. Read the interviews with Morrison on why he brought back Libra. He brought back Libra because Libra was this celestial entity that came down. I'm so totally convinced that Libra is just Libra. I don't have a problem with it if he turns out to be Desaad for just the reason that you're saying, but I am so totally convinced that the theories that Libra is somehow somebody else. I think Morrison pulled him because he was such a cool character with his cosmic relevance from DC history. He's a random character to pull out, but they released that single story with Libra to show what happened to him, to give people the background on that whole thing. I think Libra's just Libra. And I have no problem with the possibility that he could be somebody else, and I wouldn't sit there and go, oh my God, they actually did make him somebody else. I'm not on that level with it, where I'm so set, I'm not digging my feet into the point where I'm going to totally say that isn't a possibility, but I'm pretty convinced that I feel at this point that Libra is just Libra.
I don't know. That's the first thought that just popped in my head. I had another theory, and this one, you and everybody who knows the New Gods are going to bash me on it, but I'm going to throw it out there just because. What if it's Metron? Could he possibly have turned to the dark side either through his dealings with the Death and the New Gods, where he saw what they were doing there with the merging of the good and evil? Maybe he's like, okay, I'm embracing this path of a merging of the good and evil, and he is Libra because they have the chair, the Mobius chair that he wanted. And he's sitting in it, and I don't know. It's just maybe it's like he wanted it out of habit or whatnot.
They explained why they wanted the Mobius chair. It's the gun that they fired the bullet out of. That's why they wanted the Mobius chair. Libra collected that for Darkseid to be the weapon that kills Orion.
But later in this issue, when we have the Flash stuff, they talk about that the chair is just plastic and wire. It's not there's nothing special to the chair that they find.
That's not true at all. Wally. Read Wally's dialogue. Wally totally connect. I mean, let's wait till we get to that point, because we're almost there. But if you read Wally's dialogue there, Wally is the one that's looking at that chair as the gun barrel. And he totally reveals it as that. He's the one that's connecting it. Jay's going in one direction, and Wally is sitting there in the background really telling us what the Mobius chair is being used for. I'm of the mind, I don't see why Libra has to be somebody else. I mean, I've seen a lot of the online theories, and I'll even admit that I think there's a lot of really cool theories on who Libra is, including yours. So I'm not saying that they're bad theories, and I'm not saying that I would be, oh my God, I'm so pissed off that Libra's actually somebody else. I'm not at that level with it, but I guess I'm not convinced that Libra has to be somebody else. I don't see what the point would be.
And this is just one of those looking for conspiracies, looking for more of what it is. If it turns out Libra is just Libra, I'll have no problem with it. Mm-hmm. And I could see some superpower celestial being. Maybe Darkseid was the one who was able to rein him back in. So naturally, you do that, you're going to get a little bit of loyalty from the guy.
I don't mean it in the sense that I'm saying you're wrong. I'm just kind of voicing my own opinion. This is where I'm at right now. I think Libra's just plain Libra. That's why I said that I wouldn't be pissed if your ideas are right. Fine, that's cool if it turns out that way. It's just kind of my experience right now is I'm, as a reader, reading this thinking Libra's just Libra because I don't see the relevance or the point of it. And that's just my opinion. So, you can take that with a grain of salt. We jump off of this to the Daily Planet bits, which totally rocked. I didn't see them coming by any stretch. Clark writes John's obituary and with praise from Perry, and I really liked that, how Perry acknowledged that this was a very personal and very touching piece. They are also researching the missing kids, and I love that the big news in the universe would be something that the big newspaper would obviously be covering as major stories with their top reporters. John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, is a member of the Justice League of America with a long history story in this world. Of course they would write an obituary about him. This would be a big story that people would want to read about. The same thing with the missing kids. There is a dilemma right now of missing kids that are being taken, and that's something that a newspaper would want to be reporting on. This is all short-lived, though. As Jimmy goes to run an errand for Lois, Clark gets confused because he saw Jimmy earlier, and we see that it's Clayface as the bomb goes off. Lois, I'm sure, is going to live, but I've got to be honest with you. My first instinct as I read it, I'm like, oh my God, they wouldn't kill Lois, would they? I don't in a million years think that they would, but it was an emotionally, that it's actually kudos to the creative team because they got me enough with it that I was like, no way. And that is all that's needed from the moment. I don't care right now whether or not I believe that Lois would die at this point, because I don't believe she would. But at that moment, they hit me, and that was the important point of how this story was told. They give you that one moment where just for a second, you're like, they wouldn't, would they?
Yesterday when we were recording, and we were throwing out theories of the Black Lantern Corps, she was the one I was saying, I have to hold off my comments until later because it's a spoiler. And I don't want to see Lois dead. So I don't want people saying the sensei wants to kill off Lois Lane, because I don't. I love the Superman family. But just that big question, what if? What if Lois Lane became a member of the Black Lantern Corps? What if Superman had to throw down with his own wife? Tell me that wouldn't be one of those moments where you're like, holy crap, and could Clark even do it? Or would Wonder Woman have to swoop in? Tell me that would just be a moment in comic book time and legend.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of, I'm not against that possibility either. It's just with what Johns and Robinson are doing with their getting back to really strong classic Superman storytelling, I can't imagine them shelving Lois until the Black Lantern story kicks off. So I don't know. Although it all depends on when the current Superman books actually connect with Final Crisis, because they obviously aren't at the moment, because they've got their own stories going on, but at some point they're going to acknowledge what's going on in this. Wally and Jay are using their speed to get fast info for Batman. We find out that the strip club that we were all like, what is the deal with this, is where Barry and Jay met, which then connects why that would have been where we saw the lightning bolt. They find the crime Bible and the Mobius chair. Batman thinks it's a bullet fired back through time, which is why it would have been in the ground 50 years in the past when it's settled versus in the future. As they approach the chair, there is a lightning backlash. Wally thinks the chair might be the gun. When he's talking about that in his dialogue, he's saying, that's the gun barrel. And I'm taking that as the circle where the energy is coming out of. That's the gun barrel. And they're seeing that kick off. The chair comes to life, which is why when you're talking before about how them just speculating that it might not be much of anything, we all of a sudden see that it is, in fact, something more, and it's coming to life. Jay recognizes the vibrations, mentions that he thinks, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Don't you recognize who it is? Wally, Jay, everybody run. After all this time, Barry is back. And this left me with a couple of questions that are good questions at this point in time in the issue. Is the Black Racer chasing Barry or the Bullet? Because if it's chasing the Bullet, it's heading him for Orion, setting up the spot we see him in issue 1, where we see him floating in the background. That would have been after this. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing now him going back through time, following the Bullet to the point where we actually see him in the beginning. My other question would be, what happens if they stop the Bullet to Orion? Does that, and that's why I'm saying maybe it's not such a good thing for the Alpha Lantern to be keeping that body around, because that could change. Of course, that would change history in the past. And is that the pivotal event that causes the 1 month shift, or is there something else? I don't know, because evil wins at this point. But what happens if they stop the Bullet? That's opening up a door for me. Does it open up the return of the new gods, or a new god, leading to him to bring back the rest of them? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there as a possible theory right now. I'm not sold on it. There's other possibilities that are out there as well. It could be the Black Racers chasing Barry, but there's another part of me, I was looking at that, I'm like, well, there's nothing to imply that he's chasing Barry there. He could be just chasing the Bullet, and Barry's trying to stop it.
I take it as chasing the Bullet, and Barry's trying to stop it. I don't see why the Racer would chase after the Flash. It's unless the Racer is the one who fired the Bullet. If the Racer really is the instrument that allowed for the Bullet to go out and kill the gods, and he's trying to stop Barry from stopping his mission. I don't know. It's one of those things. I don't know about the racer. I don't know who this dude is or really anything about him. But my first gut is he's running after the bullet, and Barry's also doing it. So I don't know if there's going to be any interconnection or any fight that way. But it's funny, as you were talking before, I reread some of those sections, and while he initially says plastic and wires, nothing much there, but it looks like the Mobius chair. Then when it comes live, he's like, hey, wait a minute, hold on. That's when it clicks into place. So I'm like, okay. Because at first I was thinking they got the real chair, took it, put it away, and then he made a fake chair for him to sit in because he's comfortable in sitting in it. That's why I was thinking possibly Metron.
No, I don't think it's Metron in any way. I think Metron died. Very similar to the rest of the new gods, because Metron's one of the new gods. Mm-hmm. Metron is not with us. That was part of that celestial war they're talking about, so I don't think he's Metron. What I'm thinking we're seeing here, though, is the Mobius chair is the gun used by, and the reason why Libra wanted it, as we saw in issue 1, was because Libra needed to put the gun in place that Darkseid was asking for in order to take out Orion. Everything that Libra was doing was part of the plan to take down the last of the new gods. Interesting conclusion to a story. This was one, the first time I read it through, I thought it was very cool. At the end, I was very confused. I had no idea what was going on with Turpin. My feeling at the Alpha Lantern at first was that she was being controlled, not that she actually had Granny Goodness inside her. Then it started to click and connect with me that Granny Goodness has jumped from one body to another, and we're seeing her inside the Alpha Lantern, and we're seeing that Darkseid has jumped from one body to another, and he is inside Turpin. And they are bringing back the resurrection of Darkseid in a new body, I'm guessing, next issue. I'm guessing. Or sometime soon.
And that also makes sense with the kids, that they would have those kids with the superpowers. So they're going to have younger bodies for them to jump into when their current bodies wear out.
I take it as we're going to see Darkseid back in a body that's very similar to one that we're used to seeing him in. I think the kids are being gathered up to be an army or, a set of slaves or something like that for that purpose. I mean, they're specifically pulling metahumans for that reason. I mean, that goes back to what they were talking about with their living, breeding, dying for those purposes. Although you make an interesting point, because they're metahumans, would a god want to jump into a body that's a little bit more hardwired? I don't know. So that's a possibility as well. I do see kind of what you're saying, or maybe they're somehow culling them or using them to make these new bodies. I don't, we haven't seen the whole picture yet as far as how they're actually creating the new bodies. So you're right. Maybe there is a certain point they're on some way using them to make the bodies. I don't know. And it would fit the evil factory that they were talking about in the beginning to be then using them as source material on some level, whether it's their bodies or they're chopping them up and using them for that reason.
Because Darkseid would want a powerful body for him. Mm-hmm. His empire and everything is based on his power. So if he doesn't have this mega powerful form that he can call upon and that he can use, then, that's going to take away from his reign and his rule. Just because he is Darkseid and he knows a lot and he's damn good at what he does, but it's also he's got to be able to back it.
Yeah, this issue blew me away. I am so excited for this series now. When the dots connected and I started to figure out who Turpin really was and what was going on there, it's still Turpin in there, obviously, we see from his reactions, but he's not alone. It totally clicked in this, and I love the fact that we're starting off this issue in the same place Turpin's in. We're very confused. What the heck just happened to me? And how cool is that? We're taking that journey with him. I adored this. This was very well written. I encourage you, if you didn't catch some of these things, or if you caught other things, there's a lot of possibilities here. Remember, a lot of what, I'll admit my comments. I've got a lot of comments that are speculation at the moment, and that's half the fun of reading the story. Feel free to share your speculation in the forums, your own comments. If you caught some things maybe we didn't, please feel free to post those as well. I think that there's a lot of possibilities to a lot of the things that are going on in this story, and that's always fun. I don't want it all to be spoon-fed to me. I want to discover along the way. I feel that I'm a lot more in tune with what's going on in the story in issue 2 than I was in issue 1, and I like that because that's the way the journey should be. And I feel with issue 3, I'm going to have a better idea on what's going on with this story. I have a lot of faith now in this, and I think this could turn out to be one of the all-time great miniseries. This issue especially has me a lot of confidence in this one.
Oh, yeah, dude, big time. And it's funny, when I was still confused, I still wanted to read 3, and I was still like, I'm into picking up 3, but now I am charged and gung-ho. I'm like, yes, I gotta find out what's going on. It's once again, it's multiple read-throughs and discussion with people that have gotten me through this. And in a way, I like that. I really like the fact that, this isn't just a cookie-cutter story. It's not a very boom up front. You gotta read it. You gotta go between the lines. You gotta see, and you gotta bob and weave a little bit to see what's going on. Now, I've complete faith that by the end of it, everything will be eventually spoon-fed to you, and you'll know exactly what's going on. But the fact that we're seeing it now is going to be like cool moments for future stuff.
Well, remember, it's mystery and discovery for the main players in the story as well. Heroes and, even the supporting players like your Turpins and, even the Alpha Lantern, for example. They're not all clear on what's really going on at this point. I really like that aspect of this story, that it's unfolding. And I agree with you. I think it is going to all be spelled out. But Morrison's taking the concept of the new gods and redefining it. Without throwing out the past concepts, he's keeping them a part of it as well. But he's somehow expanding it, teaching us what the fifth world is. And I have a funny feeling that we're going to see a major event, and then it's going to all be turned around on us. I'm really, at this point, wondering that my big question of what happens if they stop the bullet. If Orion doesn't die, that changes quite a bit.
Well, if they stop the bullet now, none of the new gods die, because all the new gods died in the past. So if this is going back, Orion was the last of the new gods to die, so he would be the first of the new gods to die with the bullet, because you got to think reverse order. The last is first, first is last. So if they stop Orion, then none of the new gods die.
Wow, that takes us to a whole new level. I didn't even realize that. Well, I take that back. If they stop Orion from dying, then the next phase would be to stop the rest of them from dying, which would make the Flash family the most important family in this story, because they have to then, we're really speculating at this point, so we should really put a disclaimer on that. But if the Flash family, Flash would have to stop all of them. All the Flashes would. And thus bring back the return of the new gods.
Oh yeah, dude, this is definitely a kind of story going on here. I'm really looking forward to this and seeing what's going to happen. You sit here, you start thinking of different theories, your head's going to explode.
But you're right, though. Technically, if they're firing from the future back, you want to stop the first killing.
I think I'm remembering from one of the teaser walls, wasn't there something about the last is first and first is last or something like that? One of the chalkboards, whether it was the original Rip Hunter one or the most recent one they did at the DC Nation at New York, there was something last and first. I can't remember what exactly it was, and we don't have it up in front of us.
That was First Boy, Last Boy, which is talking about Anthro and Commandy. They're talking about Kings Reborn, though. And the Kings Reborn, I'm wondering if that isn't perhaps something to do with the gods coming back.
Yeah, probably. That's got to be the new gods coming back and all that. So, okay, I knew there was something first and last, and I couldn't remember what it was because I was going from memory.
I'm anxious to see where this is going. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. We had a lot of speculation on the end on how this could possibly go, but I like the fact that right now that anything I'm saying feels to me even like speculation, that there could be this whole other angle. Because I like the fact that on this one I was totally surprised by what happened with Turpin. And that how that opened up, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, this is what he's doing. And we saw all kinds of different things with that. So it'll be interesting to see where things go beyond. I'm thrilled to death that I read this one, though. This was just a fantastic read. Let's talk real quickly. There was a panel here, and Jim and I didn't take notes at this panel, which we did at DC Nation, mainly because we just sat back and enjoyed it. It was called Brian Michael Bendis versus Jeff Johns. And the cool thing about it was the whole premise was, instead of it being DC versus Marvel, The idea was going to be just an open dialogue. Well, this whole thing turned into this wrestling match, and they decided to then Shanghai the whole panel, kind of do their own thing with it. So they brought up the creators who were in the audience, and on the DC end, it was Ethan Van Sciver and Gail Simone, and then on the Marvel end, they brought up a whole bunch of people. Oliver Copiel was there, C.B. Cebulski was there, and I'm not doing this justice because I didn't take notes. Dave Finch was there. It was, and I know I'm forgetting a couple people, and I apologize. I'm really shooting this off the top of my head because it was just, the whole thing was a joy. What they did was they decided to do a panel where they just said, hey, come on up and ask us the questions, because there is no DC versus Marvel as far as the creators are concerned. It's more of a just about creating great comics. A lot of great questions came out of that panel. One of the big ones is obviously the, lateness, and how they felt about lateness. And I really thought it was cool to hear creators talking about comic lateness and what that means. And the cool thing was, not only did they address their feelings about it, but they addressed some of the honest issues that people face in real life as a creator. Gail Simone mentioned the fact, your computer crashes. Well, if you're a writer, that's going to be one heck of a big problem if your computer crashes, because that's where your work is. Those type of things happen, and they'll, cause some delays. Or it was really interesting to have them talk about it. They weren't making excuses for anything. They talked about how sales numbers show that lateness is a problem, and the fact that comic companies are addressing that lateness and making changes due to that lateness. So it is something that is a concern. But I thought it was interesting that, and they didn't dodge any questions. They dodged the fact that which company's better, DC or Marvel, and they did a funny thing where the hands raised in the audience and DC won, woohoo!
Okay, now one thing though, yes, DC won, the hands raised, but we kind of stacked the audience there, because this panel took place right after the DC Nation panel.
Shush.
And they didn't actually clear out the room.
You're wrong.
They let everyone who was already at the DC Nation panel stay.
Not true.
So we kind of stacked the room, so it was kind of cool.
DC. I thought it was really fun, though. Then Brian Michael Bendis, who, I got to say one thing. To all the people there, they were having a good time. They got into some touchy subjects, but the spirit of the panel stayed the whole time, where it was all about dialogue and sharing opinions, and we got to hear that. Brian Michael Bendis came back with the whole thing. He was very, very tongue-in-cheek. He wasn't saying this in a snotty way or anything like that. He said, let's look at the sales numbers, just because the audience did that. And it was a lot of that, where, if there was any poking fun, it was all done in jest. It was all done with the spirit of that. There was a lot of questions asked about who would your favorite character be in the opposing company. The whole panel would answer questions like that. I did notice that Bendis dodged that question, though.
No, he said the question.
Oh, did he say that?
He said I'm 90% sure he said the question.
I don't think that's what he said at all. I think he was saying it was a good question. I think he said it was a good question over and over again. Batman came up over and over again. One of the artists said the Legion. And it was interesting. Superman was another name that came up from the other company. It was really great. Names like Spider-Man, Captain America were thrown out there. It was really, to me, just a fun, interesting panel. It was one of the more entertaining panels I'd been to, because the creators were just having fun up there with the free-form nature of the whole thing. People were coming up asking question after question. You asked a great question. Yes, did a comic ever make you cry? And it was funny. It was one of those questions where you were, I think, trying to have them pin down like a single issue either that they had written or created, or one that they'd read that had done that. But then the question kind of took a life of its own. Brian Michael Bendis took the lead with it first right away, talking about how not only it was something that he wrote that you get like heavily into, a lot of times then, as it went through the panel, when you get the art back, a lot of times seeing a artist's interpretation of your work and then looking at that and seeing that scene come to life a lot of times will choke you up. And I thought it was interesting that your question, I knew where you were going with your question. It was interesting that your question took on its own life based on interpretation, and I really liked that.
Well, that's because I'm a master interviewer, so I can do an open-ended question like that that'll lead to a discussion another way. Okay, this was a blind squirrel theory. I will admit that. I threw that out there because I was like, I think that'd be probably a cool question. But one of the neatest responses had to be from Jeff Johns and Ethan Van Sciver when they were talking about the Sinestro Corps War, when the scenes where Kyle becomes Parallax, and Parallax just breaks down and defeats Kyle, and they said that was just a really, the way it was written. Then when they see the final pencils, when they saw the final inking of it, it was just this really powerful, passionate sequence to them, and they were like really glad that art and the physical artist as well as the written word, it was all matching, and it was exactly what the one wanted, what the other one wanted. It was one of those things where they were just firing on all cylinders, and they, and I gotta agree. As they're talking, I'm remembering that scene, going, "Oh yeah, that was awesome."
There were some really cool questions though, because they were asking questions about, are you reading each other's company crossovers, and, talk about what they liked and disliked about that, what book you'd like to be on if you're with the other company, which I thought was an interesting question. We didn't do transcripts of this one, so I'm not going to go crazy going on with it. I'm just going to say that I do hope that they do another panel like this in the future, because it was great to see creators from both DC and Marvel on a panel, which, when they were bringing it up to their knowledge, hadn't been done before like this, where it was really specifically for the purpose of having all the creators up there just to talk about comics. Seen that a lot more of these Sunday morning comic chats have been coming up at panels. It was something that DC's done at a couple of the cons now. Now this is kind of coming in. It's great to see a celebration and embracing of the medium. They talked about the difference between Marvel and DC, how Marvel's more grounded in reality, whereas, DC, on the other hand, has its iconic characters. And they weren't implying that the Marvel characters weren't well known or things like that. It's just kind of the status of your Superman, with how, they've been around since the Golden Age, and Batman and things like that. And they were saying that, whereas your Marvel characters tend to feel like they're the current generation characters, in that type of sense. Whereas DC's characters have been around for multiple generations, and there's that type of history to those characters, which was interesting to hear both perspectives all told in a positive light, and how there's strengths and weaknesses to both sides of it from that perspective. They talked about the two different multiverses, because Marvel has its own multiverse in the sense that you've got your Ultimate line and the regular Marvel line, and how they're very separate. Whereas in DC's case, the multiverse is a part of the main universe, and they're using that as a rich storytelling feature. Whereas in Marvel's line, they've basically created a whole unique universe, which is a separate entity unto itself, and how there's strengths in both presentations, and how it's... And I agree with that in the sense that it's great that as comic fans, there are two very different approaches to comics in the big two, because in my mind, that offers a lot of choice, a lot of jump-on opportunity for a variety of different readers who prefer a variety of different storytelling. So I think that was really an interesting part of this presentation.
Oh yeah, big time, dude. And it was kind of neat just seeing them, and because there's obviously, friendship and respect between Jeff Johns and Brian Michael Bendis. And they even said that in the beginning, that they were friends, and they had a very similar path in, the comic book creation. And it's, each one does things a little bit differently, but they have a same kind of similar layout. They just handle it just a little bit differently, and people who really like Jeff Johns may not like Bendis, and vice versa, just because those similarities with the little quirks. And it was just a cool thing seeing the two of them, especially because they first, were talking about, hey, let's both two of us do a panel. That'd be kind of fun. It looked like it was going to be like a spotlight panel, and immediately they turned it into a versus and all that, and they said, no, this isn't what we wanted. I really like that. That was just this is about comics. This is about, this medium that we love, and let's just talk about that. And that was just a really awesome experience.
It was great seeing all the creators over there. They addressed things like movies, and what do they bring to comics? And there was a lot of debate up there, as far as, do they bring new readers to comics? Points were brought up on one side of the argument that they bring new trade readers, and they do increase the percentage of people reading that. But Ethan Van Sciver brought up some interesting points as well, where he was saying the point is that a lot of these readers, why aren't they sticking around? And actually the point was made across the board that there aren't a lot of people nowadays, with all the competition of different medium out there, your television, your videos, your video games, things like that, there's a lot of competition for reading in general out there. So it's, the comic audience is a very unique audience in the fact that they're people who enjoy reading and enjoy that presentation. And I will say I agreed with those points a great deal. I do think you pick up, though, for all the people that might start picking up trades and things like that, I know from my own experience, I've got a friend of mine named Chris Kendall, a very good friend who wasn't reading comics because of the movies and because he's a movie buff. He is one of those guys, if I had a movie question right now, I would pick up the phone, I'd call him up, and he would have the answer. Just random, and I'm talking about like the most random trivia question in the world. I'd call him up, and he would have the answer immediately. Because of the sheer amount of really solid comic book movies that have been coming out, in the last couple of years, those brought him to comics. His exposure to comics was in his childhood. He was a Spider-Man fan. Now all of a sudden he's reading Marvel Comics. He's read some DC because of some of the events that he was reading about. But, it is something where he's stuck around due to that. I agree with the theory that what Ethan Van Sciver was saying, though, in the sense that I don't think that is an example of the typical person that goes into the movies. But I think you are, every little bit, in my eyes, every few people that come over is more people that are reading comics. More sales. It's good for the industry. Just getting, and I think Gail Simone mentioned something about exposure and how the exposure is a good thing. And if I'm misquoting her, I apologize. But I agree. Anything that's giving comics more exposure, maybe getting one person to try them out who before didn't try them out, that to me is always a good thing for the industry, because you really want to get the maximum amount of people who would potentially read comics to understand what they are, that they are cool, and that they're diverse as a genre. So anything that's adding to that and opening up those opportunities is a good thing. It may not be numbers in the sense that they're going to have the same numbers as the movie-going audience, and I did understand that theory. I don't think that's going to be the case either, but still, you want to maximize that audience, because what'll happen is if you maximize the audience and you increase the numbers on books that are being canceled that maybe shouldn't be because there'd be more of a readership, that in itself is a victory. So I'd like to see that happen. This was a great panel. I can't say enough about it. It was one of those that I'm like, we didn't take notes because, in all honesty, it was one of those, we had just come from the DC Nation panel. We had taken an intense amount of notes from the DC Nation panel to have the conversation. But I thought this panel was worthy enough and had some really great points to it. And it was great to see the creators embracing the industry together and having some really solid dialogue. They didn't dodge questions that were controversial. They discussed them. They didn't mind poking fun at each other, while at the same time complimenting each other, talking about the strengths and weaknesses of both sides from a creative end, which I thought was very, very cool. To me, it was a very fun panel, and I'd like to see them do something like this again, because I thought it was very entertaining as a fan to be able to sit there and enjoy this. So kudos to everybody who was on the stage for that. It was cool.
That was definitely a fun panel that I'm glad, in a way I'm really glad we didn't take notes on it. We just sat back and we enjoyed it. And I got to ask my question, so that was kind of cool.
I give you credit for it, but it's funny. It's one of the things, when you were up there asking your question, you first told me the question, you said you were going to be asking, was there a question that made you cry? And I like to myself, like, first of all, I would never think to ask that question. But you were saying, one of the things that I like about you is you will think of questions that I'd say to myself, I would never go up and ask that. And I don't mean that in any way as an insult to you. I typically, when it comes to questions, and I overanalyze, I do it on the show a lot too when I'm prepping for it. It's one of the great things about doing interviews with you here when we record, is the fact that you will think of questions that on the surface I'm thinking, well, that's a basic question, but it's one I would avoid, because I'm kind of like, it sounds kind of hokey to me. But then when you asked the question and it took on such an interesting life, and I started thinking to myself about what comic made me cry. And, I've shared it on the show before. The Ma Kent special was one that just connected with my mother. And I think we've all had that comic that emotionally, you don't have to be into tears. And Jeff Johns made that point. And they all the creators did, actually, because sometimes they talked about the way comics elicit other kinds of emotion, like laughter and, those type of things where it can, it even connects you with a past event in your life. And that was one of the things that for me was the strength of your question. I'm like, it's something I probably wouldn't have asked myself because I would have overanalyzed the question way too much and dropped it on that purpose. But it's one of the great things about you is that you're not afraid to ask those questions, and it turned out to be a strong question. Good job. Just a quick little point of clarification. Some of our comments, when you'll hear them about Final Crisis as we're talking in the DC Nation panel, were recorded well before we even read Final Crisis number 2 a second or third time. The reason why I flip-flopped the order of our audio on this is I figured that people were probably most interested in hearing Final Crisis number 2 first. So when we recorded that audio, I plugged it in ahead of everything else. So just during the DC Nation panel, if you're like, guys, we just heard you guys talk about Final Crisis number 2, and there didn't seem to be any confusion or anything at all in it. It's actually an interesting point in commentary just to see where our journey went. There were points in time where I was just, after my first reading, I was just plain baffled by Final Crisis number 2. And then when I went back and reread the second and third time, that's when there's a lot of these elements that started to click together. I still got a lot of questions, but I'm at the point right now where I don't feel they're confusing questions. I feel that they're story elements that are left there dangling for us to follow along and find out along on the journey. But I thought it was interesting. So if you guys are baffled during a few parts of this where you're like, guys, from your Final Crisis discussion, this doesn't match up, the reason why is this was actually recorded well before. We recorded our Final Crisis number 2 discussion Sunday morning. This was, in fact, recorded Friday night. So just a little heads up on this one, and hope you enjoy it. All right, it's Friday night, and right now for us it's 11 o'clock here. But we wanted to really just start talking while it was fresh in our head about the DC Nation panel. We're going to be chatting about news and things that came out there. We're going to share our own reactions. Because DC podcasts these, or you can see some of these things on websites, we're not going for a straight regurgitation. It's more so our feelings on some of these events. Attending this panel, and it would start off right from the beginning with Dan DiDio. Now, one of the things that I like that came up over and over again at the panel that I want to editorialize a little bit, seeing is, we're a podcast and that's kind of what we do. He started right away with current and future editor of DC, Dan DiDio. And that's, for those of you that have been checking around the internet, there was this crazy rumor that started that Dan DiDio might be replaced. I liked that he addressed it. It's proof that they do take a look at the internet. But they did make comments over and over again on the show, and there is a certain point that people need to be a little wary of what is internet rumor, because unless they're backed up by a reputable news source where, it's actually from a website, instead of a person posting, hey, I heard, or I think I heard, or something like that, you got to be very wary about what people are saying. There were a lot of questions that came out during the Q&A portion where people said, I saw on the internet that, but then they didn't have anything backing up. Like, they didn't say, well, I saw on Newsram, or I saw on DCComics.com, or I saw on this creator's message board from this creator. Which to me, if you're hearing it direct from a creator when they're talking about something that's specific to their career or their book, okay, that's something where they're editorializing and you can kind of take that and go with it. But there were a lot of internet rumors that were being thrown out, and they were just saying you got to watch that. Not saying that there's anything wrong with internet rumors, but that you've got to be wary when you hear an internet rumor on that being a reputable fact, which I thought was an interesting point.
Oh, yeah, and they were all having fun with it, and it was just the, oh, well, you saw it on the internet, so it must be true, kind of, running gag. But there's still, some, it's like, how to word it? It's not just a complete dismissive, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. But it was they didn't dodge a lot of these questions. They went out and they did answer them, saying, no, that's not real. No, don't worry about that. But it is kind of when you're reading these things, you got to look at sources. You got to look at what's going on, what's being said, why is it being said, who is saying it, who's making the claims and whatnot. You got to watch. There's a lot of information out there, but there's a lot of bogus information out there, so you got to keep your eyes open.
Look at where you're getting your source from. I would actually say that forget about just in comics. That's something you got to remember from the internet in general. Just because it's on a web page, as a teacher, I've got to watch that with my students because we'll use websites for research purposes. And the fact that just because somebody has a website doesn't mean they're a reputable news source, and you got to check what is their background information. But let's get off of that one because let's get right into this panel. Also on the panel was Bob Wayne, Vice President of Sales. Senior Editor Jan Jones, Art Baltazar and Franco from Tiny Titans, Gail Simone from Wonder Woman and Secret Six, and, of course, Tranquility. Sean McKeever from Teen Titans and the upcoming Terror Titans miniseries. Tony Daniel from Batman Rip. Ethan Van Sciver, who announced he's going to be doing an upcoming project with Gail Simone. Jeff Johns was on there. Of course, Jeff Johns, who's writing just a ton of books right now. But it was really, to me, it was a nice lineup for a panel. As the panel opened up, some of the things they talked about was, of course, the typical thing, Final Crisis, who's reading it, who's understanding it, with number 2. Who is your favorite Flash? Barry Allen, Wally West. Wally West had the most. The rest had a kind of a mixed crowd reaction at that point. And Barry got a "you" from somebody, which Dan took as Barry won. It was interesting to see Wally, because he really has been, for the decent amount of time, this generation's Flash. It was interesting to see that. Martian Manhunter, his death, they were talking about in there. Tony Daniel said that he loved him. Ethan Van Sciver followed up that he was outraged. Franco said that he's sad, but he thinks that he deserved it. Gail believed in reincarnation. They asked if Flash, Barry Allen returning, was a balance for that, and the universal reply was no. I guess it's kind of an interesting question. Jim, the Martian Manhunter death, how does it make you feel? The Martian Manhunter death. How are you feeling about that? Did you like that? The fact that he's dead? Do you want to see him back again? What are your feelings on this?
I thought of a really, well, what the heck, I might as well anger some people. Better dead than red, man. Better dead than red. You know, Red Planet Martian. Okay, bad joke. You're looking at me like I'm an idiot. No, I don't know. I think it was a good death, to be honest. Well, not a good, honorable death for the guy, but I think it was a good story moment. And I'm still not convinced he's dead. When they were talking about the Martian, being dead, it was, Gail said, "I'm glad I believe in reincarnation," implying maybe she, see him coming back. Pretty sure it was Jeff Johns who said no comment. And he kind of had like a little smirk on his face, like, is he really dead? And that's how I took it. Now, there wasn't anything where he said it, and it was funny because they kind of, breezed over his answer and didn't stick to it. But it was just something that when I saw him, like, oh, I wonder if maybe he's not dead.
Yeah, I'd take it as he definitely died, and I think you're kind of digging on that one. I don't think that necessarily means that there isn't the possibility in the Final Crisis storytelling for him to come back. I don't know if it's going to be that soon. I'm just kind of throwing out there that that's a possibility. I also think there's a possibility we might see him in Blackest Night, which is also a possibility as well. I don't know. I'm kind of throwing out there that possibility. I think, though, that I'll say right now that my thought is right now that it would be a little lame if he came back right away. But there's ways to work that into this strange events that are going on in this story right now where he could come back. So I don't know. I would be happy either way. But right now, I think the death was such an important story element that for me, I liked it a great deal. And admitting that I've really been liking John a lot lately. So it's not an issue of like, oh, he's expendable. I don't mean it that way. I just think it was a good story point, a good plot element. I would be happy to see him back. I'd be happy if they put him on the shelf for a while, just in the sense that to show that his death had some longevity and meant something.
And one thing that we did kind of quickly glance over that I thought was hysterical when Dan was initially doing the whole Final Crisis, who understands it. One of the people in the panel were saying how they didn't know what was going on. They were completely confused. And Dan goes to him like, "Well, are you going to buy 3?" And the guy goes, "No." The look on Didio's face was just like, huh? What? And the guy just starts laughing. Of course I'm going to buy it. I'm here, aren't I?
When the commentary came back to Barry again, one of the people in the audience, and they went to the audience at this point, saying, is there a better plan for Wally? Just a commentary that they weren't caring for much with what's been going on with Wally's storytelling. He pointed to Ethan Van Sciver, who, obviously there's been, internet rumors obviously going around that, not internet rumors, it was, mentioned that Ethan Van Sciver could possibly be working with the Flash sometime soon. And this was mentioned at the Heroes Con. when he said he's sitting right next to me going to Jeff Johns, I'm immediately saying to myself, is Jeff Johns going to be writing The Flash next? Nothing was confirmed, nothing was verifying. This was just based on the conversation there, so that doesn't mean it's 100% confirmed. But there was something else that came up later that I'll mention when we get to that point in the panel. One of the things that Dan Adio said at this point, that Wally will be a part of the Titans, which he is right now, for the considerable future. How do you feel about the Flashes? Barry Allen being back, which they talked about at this panel. How do you feel about the whole Flash situation? What would you like to see out of all this, Jim?
I would like to see 4 Flashes. Barry with the JLA, Wally with the Titans, and Bart, of course, back with Teen Titans, and I'd like to see Jay with JSA. Seriously, I miss Bart so much that I would have absolutely no problem with them bringing him back and de-aging him, making him a kid again. And normally those stories, I hate those. I absolutely just despise those stories. But because Bart is such friends with Robin and such friends with Cassie and just such, he belongs on the Teen Titans. I wouldn't even mind him coming back as Impulse or some other name. I don't care, but I want 4 Flashes.
I'm going to say ditto to your comments, with the exception of I want to see Bart with the Legion.
There's a point later on that was raised where someone does ask about Bart Allen coming back, and Dan, intentional slip, accidental slip, who knows? But he goes, "Have you read the Legions of Three Worlds yet?" And then everyone's like, "Whoa, whoa!" like that, and then of course all the creators in the panel just kind of shake their head, and they remind Dan that it's not out yet. And then they turned over to Jeff Johns, who was what was it? He's like no comment or something.
Dan Adio said, "No plans at this time." Did I cover for that? And Jeff Johns was just shaking his head. So Legion of Three Worlds is obviously going to tell us, well, and expectedly, though. I don't think as fans we're overly shocked with the fact that Who's in the Rod is going to be discovered in Legion of Three Worlds.
And for the record, I have absolutely no problem with Bart in the Legion. I hope he's not just brought in just for one story arc then disappeared. If they're going to bring him into the Legion, keep him in the Legion. Keep him along with that story arc. Do something with him there. Keep the character around, because I like the character. I like Bart Allen, and even if they modify his powers somewhat, as we said, he can be Impulse Lad or Kid Impulse or whatever they want to go with, however they want to do the Legion naming, I don't care, as long as it's Bart, as long as Bart is alive.
Speaking of, seeing as we're talking about Legion of Three Worlds, one of the things that have been announced at previous cons has been that there's going to be one Legion when this is done. Now, it's honestly my hope that if Bart is coming back in there, that Bart would stay with the Legion. Here's the question, Jim. What Legion do you want that to be?
Mine. I want my Legion.
What Legion is that?
Actually, my Legion is the current story that's currently out there. Legion of Superheroes. Yes, I do like the other ones, but for some reason, this is the team that brought me into the game. So I don't know. It's gonna be weird. I don't think the current Legion will survive. I think it's going to be a meshing of all of the Legions. I still do want them to remain more younger heroes, because the one Legion version was adult Legionnaires, and I do like them younger, so I definitely want I don't want the older ones. Now granted, they could do like the JSA where they have some older, some younger, do a mixture of the two. That way you really have a meshing of all of the legions.
The interesting piece of this puzzle for me is the Time Trapper. Anytime you're dealing with time travel storylines, you open up opportunities to change things, mix things up a bit, where you could wind up with a teenage Legion that is the one that we're currently reading, but that their history has been changed somewhat, where they're the Legion that in fact met Superman, which is a possibility as well. I have no idea where this storyline is going to go. the Time Trapper being involved has opened up the possibility to me that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's one of the legions the way that we're seeing them now, which is something else that I don't think we've considered. We're looking at, is it going to be A, B, or C? What if there's a D?
Dude, man, come on. It's too late to start taking these thoughts.
You have to speculate it, though, when you're talking about it. There's a story arc coming up right now, and I'm going to go on to the possibility that maybe we're going to see something that's maybe an amalgamation of what we've seen already, where their histories are kind of blended together in the sense that we get something that's a little more cohesive, where we aren't necessarily ignoring any of them. I don't know. So
we'll get the pieces and parts. They take the best parts of this, so it'll be like the chicken McNuggets of the Legion of Superheroes.
And hopefully like the dipping sauce it's been put into. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of, and I'm not saying, please don't say that that's necessarily what's going to happen right now. They didn't announce that. It could be very well that they pick A, B, or C. Just speculating right now that maybe there's another possibility that we aren't considering, and that's an interesting story to me. So I'm curious to see what happens with the Legion of Three Worlds. That's one of the ones I'm probably the most excited about of the spin-off miniseries that's coming out. A great question was asked, and it's great to see that at all of these cons, Johnny DC questions are being asked. A great question about Billy Batson and the Magic of Shazam. It's going to be in the first week of July. It's going to be off of the Jeff Smith Monster Society of Evil, which was great. I loved that tremendously. Somebody asked the question, do you think it's going to be as big as Fawcett was? And Jeff Johns came back with, in 2105, it's going to be as big as Fawcett. And they were joking around about it, but they mentioned in reality that right now that, in the era when Fawcett was huge, he said nothing in comics right now is as big as Fawcett was. And that's a great point. He's mentioning that the market's different right now. And there are a lot more distractions and a lot more competition now to comic books than there were back in that day. It was a very different era and a different amount of readership in comics. So that was the point that was being made there. And I really liked that. The Billy Batson, did you read Monster Society of Evil by Jeff Smith yet?
I never read it. And it's one of those ones where I'm like, I think I should pick it up, maybe, read it or borrow it from you.
You know what? I liked it enough, and I want you to read it enough that if you remind me when we get back, I bought the hardcover, but I also had bought the original 4 Prestige format issues. I will give them to you. I like Jeff Smith, and I like the story that much that I want you to read it. So, especially you got Billy Batson and the Magic Shazam, didn't you?
I pre-ordered it, and I will definitely take free comics from you. Okay.
Well, no, I think it's honestly, I think it's that good of a story that I would like you to read it. And seeing as I have a second copy of it, I'd rather just give it to you than eBay it or something like that. I'd rather you just have it and read it because I think it's that good of a story. I think you will really, really enjoy it. So it's very accessible. The artwork's fantastic. It's a lot of fun, and I think if it's going to build off of that and those concepts, you should read it first. It's a great read, so definitely something that I'd be glad to see you read. They asked a good question. I'm glad to see that they didn't dodge this. There's always this speculation that people know more about what's going on than they actually do, and this is another one. Are there character changes due to legal issues? And they were talking about the Charlton characters, such as Captain Atom, Blue Beetle, and things like that, and the question. Well, Captain Atom, and Monarch, the honest answer is this was a story-driven change. That was a choice. They were going back to something that happened in the old Armageddon storyline, and they decided to bring that into current continuity. Blue Beetle, again, was a creative change, obviously, and they talked a good couple years ago at the Chicago Con. Dan DiDio was talking about the big push at DC to start diversifying their characters and beginning that process, and they're doing it slowly, targeting it to try and develop compelling characters that are going to stick and last. And, Blue Beetle, obviously, with the push they're getting, and they're sticking with Blue Beetle, whose sales numbers, as they mentioned, are not the greatest, but it's a book that they believe in. It's a character concept that they believe in, that they're continuing to support. So I really respect them as a company for making that stand on a book that is, to me, it's a very interesting and a very unique book.
Yeah, and I got to ditto that I'm Beetle happy. I really like Jaime. I think he is just he's a great character. He's got a great team, the Team Beetle, his family, as well as, the Beetle side, support for him. It's just a really cool read where you get this high school kid who's now a superhero. He's got to do the right thing, but he's also the dun-da-da type of hero. He is the guy who's jumping into danger that could kill him, but because it's the right thing to do. And he has that true hero character. And I strongly advise, if you're sitting there and you got that, in your budget where you got room for one more title, pick this one up and give it a read through. See what it happens. See if it sparks a chord with you, or if you got something in your slot that you're like, it's not really doing it for me. Well, hey, this may be a chance. Try this title, give it a read, see what happens.
It's available on in-stock trades. I'm not just saying that because they're a sponsor of our show. It's you can pick up the trade at a discount. Check out Volume 1 of Blue Beetle and see if it's the right book for you, and you can do it in that very affordable rate, read an arc, and just kind of say, hey, is this the title for me? It's a great character. One of the things that baffle me, it's one of the things I love about our forum is, a lot of times when they'll see something that baffles them, they'll post on the forum, and they were saying that there has been some, on internet chatter, that there were people, at least a decent enough amount that they noticed it, that were upset about the Spanish language issue, which to me made my head spin. I'm sitting here like, first of all, it was a one-off issue. The thing I found unique about it is, we talk about Starman, and it reminded me a lot of the Talking with David issues in Starman, where it was a nice little, considering his heritage, a nice little unique one-shot issue that was done for storytelling purposes to add atmosphere, mood, and show how this character was a little bit of a different flavor. Plus, they put the doggone script in the back. I don't read Spanish by any stretch. I wouldn't want every issue like this, but I wouldn't mind one bit if they did it like as a once-a-year thing for a storytelling reason, like they did with this. And that's the deal with Talking with David. And I want to clarify, it was actually brought up in the forum, and it was a very good point. Whenever you compare something, a lot of times are you comparing the same negative comments about it? No. Talking with David never had negative comments about it. I'm only comparing it because in Starman, it was something that was used as a device, and we talk about this in the Around Comics podcast, because I was on there for the Starman Omnibus, which is an upcoming episode of Around Comics. I'll link to that on the website as well. They were kind enough to invite me to come over and chat about that book. But one of the points about Talking with David, it was a one-off issue that served as a story mover, an atmosphere, mood, setting, something that was unique to that particular book. And that, to me, is what this Blue Beetle issue was. I really, really liked it. I know you were a big fan of it as well.
Oh, yeah, big time. And it was a cool issue, and it wasn't just showing him with his family, which it showed, but it also had some pretty cool fight scenes with Parasite in it. So it had action as well as a cool, gripping story. And I like the fact that Dan and them didn't really dodge these questions. They treated them real. They're like, no, these were not merchandising or anything like that. These were creative things. This was the creative direction of these characters. This was used to tell a good story.
The question came up because these were character properties that were with a previous company. Was there issues as far as being able to get them to use them for the purposes they wanted to make character changes, things like that they needed to, and that's where it came up. Are we seeing new people in those roles? Because that gives you more legal freedom with those characters to be able to utilize them the way that you want to. And I think that's coming up, too, because of a lot of the issues currently with Superboy and, thus carrying over to Superman. I think that people are kind of lumping a whole bunch of stuff into one particular issue. Billy Batson was also brought up at that point, is he no longer Captain Marvel? And they said, no, Billy Batson is still Captain Marvel. That never changed. Captain Marvel, they call him CM3, Freddy, is called Shazam now because they said that we like the characters to be, he said, and they were quite frank with it, to be the same as the title of the book. But that doesn't change Billy's title of Captain Marvel, and that has nothing to do with that. That, again, is, direction based on the title of the book, and I liked that explanation. It was a very good explanation. I was glad they didn't dodge the question, though, because they joked around about those things, but then when they were serious issues, rather than ignoring them or dodging them, they actually addressed them, as real issues, and I really respected that as well. Question was asked about an ambush bug showcase possibility, and Bob Wayne said it's under consideration. Would you buy, Jim, you borrowed the issues from me, would you buy an ambush bug showcase of the older material? Considering when we reviewed it, that obviously some of the jokes are out of date and things like that, but would you buy that? I'll tell you this way, I've got all of those issues. I would consider buying the showcase just because I would love to have them all in one little volume like that. So I would actually consider purchasing it, because I've been collecting all the showcases anyway. But Ambush Bug I would collect, whereas maybe some other series I wouldn't, just because I would love to see that all collect. And I'm sure that there's things, I don't have every single appearance of Ambush Bug, and I'm sure this would have every appearance of Ambush Bug in it. That, for me, would be also worth it.
Now, I have Ambush Bug and Son of Ambush Bug.
Oh, okay.
These were pickups at cons that I in the past, and when we first read it, I didn't get a lot of the inside jokes, but as I got into it, I'm like, oh, you know what, this is something I probably should own just because, just to have it in the library and just to read it, and just know a little bit more about the, AB. So, but Showcase, I don't know, to be honest with you, I can't say I would definitely. It would be one of those things where I'd have to look at, take a look at it, see what is included with it, and that would be my final decisioning.
I think it's great, though, if they do it, because there's so many fans that have not had an opportunity to read that. I forgot that you'd picked up those. I do remember now when you did that at the cons. That's actually a testament in itself, though, to how good the books are. We did it, and you decided to go ahead and pick up the book on your own, just because of the fact that you obviously had fun with it. So I hope that Showcase is collected, because that would be nice to have that affordable volume. A question came up about Final Crisis and how quote-unquote confusing it is, which admittedly there's a lot going on and a lot being developed. I can see how people would feel that way. To me, I think, and we'll talk about on this episode issue 2, but to me, yes, I understand the point that it can be perceived as confusing right now. As the stories develop, Dan Dio said, it will become more clear. The direction that it's going in, it will be more clear. He said right now what you're seeing is the fifth world being developed, the interpretation of the fifth world being developed, so people can, they're laying that groundwork for that. Darkseid is basically trying to get that all under his control, which is why evil wins, because we've got this evil god who right now doesn't have any checks and balances in place, which is what I started to get from the conversation. And some of this now I'm starting to delve into my own kind of speculation on what's happening here. I liked the fact that, again, they didn't just say, you didn't understand that? What, are you crazy? They actually were addressing the question that as the story comes on, things are going to be more clear. This is where it's supposed to be at the moment. And even, it's funny, going back to the other panel that we mentioned, Bendis versus Johns, when the question came up, and it was kind of a venomous question in that line about Final Crisis, they didn't, not only did they not dodge it, but Brian Michael Bendis said that, I've read Grant's work in things like The Filth, and he said, a lot of times with Morrison's stories, that happens in the beginning, but as it goes on, by the time you hit the end, you're like, that was just the coolest story ever. And there are elements like that where you're still a little bit confused at that point, but you just had this great experience. I don't think, just kind of editorializing it myself, I totally agree with Bendis' comment in that you feel that way during a lot of Grant Morrison's work. But in this particular case, I think what's going to happen is this one in particular, especially because it's laying the groundwork for this fifth world and how it's going to be, I think it's all going to be explained, and it's all going to tie up in a nice, neat bow, because the whole point of this story is to leave us with a fifth world status quo that is going to affect the DC Universe. That's my speculation on the whole thing right now. I agree to a certain extent with those comments, but for me, and without going into too much detail, issue 2 cleared up a lot for me, made things a lot less confusing for me. And I'm not saying that everybody has to have the same experience, but I'm very hopeful that that process continues and everything's going to make sense. I'm enjoying the ride a great deal right now, so it's worth it. I'm going to stick on board, and I want to see what's going to happen. Dan D also made the point that a lot of things are going to be cleared up during that skip month, where there's some of the one-shots that are coming out that are going to kind of expand and kind of clear up some of the concepts that are going on there. So he said during that month there will be an opportunity for that to be cleared up as well.
Yeah, this is...
One thing I'm going to say is Morrison's not writing all the one-shots. I don't know if he might be writing Superman Beyond. I don't know. I thought he was only writing Final Crisis, is my understanding on the whole thing. My understanding was that his story was very self-contained. I think the one-shots expand upon a lot of those ideas, but I don't think that they're necessary in the sense that you have to read them to get a complete story in Final Crisis. We'll have to obviously see. That's my speculation right now. It's hard for me to... It's not an issue of am I right or am I wrong. I have no clue. Just from everything they've been presenting, it looks like that's going to be a self-contained miniseries in itself. These are, especially things like the Spectre and stuff like that, I'm sure offshoots of concepts that are developed in Final Crisis, which you can choose to follow or not. But I'm following them just because they look darn cool, and I'm into the whole Final Crisis experience. I guess to me, the issue is, do you want, when you read a story, everything to be spelled out for you right away? Do you have to have that when you read a story? In this particular case, I usually understand Grant's work by the end. I will admit that I agree with Bendis to a certain extent, that there's those stories where Grant's being way out there, that 2 and 3 readings in, I don't quite understand everything, but I can't, in fairness, if you're reading All-Star Superman right now, there's not a whole lot that's confusing in that particular title, if you follow me. There's bits in the beginning where I'm not quite sure the direction he was going in as far as how is this going to end, but I didn't find the book confusing. I think this is going to end off more like All-Star Superman than The Filth, if that makes sense, to use the example that Bendis talked about in that panel. And I think that some of the I think all of the confusion is going to be cleared up by the end. I think because of the fact that so many new characters are being introduced for storytelling purposes, I'm sure, and there's characters like Sonny Sumo and Shiloh Norman, who are ones that I think aren't going to be familiar to people who haven't read any of the Kirby or the Seven Soldiers stuff, that because we're seeing them for the first time here, that's going to be a little confusing. But I don't think by any stretch that people are going to be confused at the end. That's what I think. That's my take on it. I don't know how you could drop Final Crisis at issue 2. That, to me, is the part where I'd be like, whoa.
It was one of the weird things I was doing this time. I was listening in on other people's conversations. I was kind of being a little sneaky, and I was just listening to people talk, and I did get from just people there is a discomfort with it. Now, granted, it's... How many conversations did I listen into? Would I ever even remember looking if I saw these people again? No. But it was just something weird that I kept picking up when I was like, some people would be standing in line for signings, or standing in line getting ready to go into the DC Nation panel, or people walking out of the panel talking, and just stuff I overheard. And it was one of the things where I never heard anyone say, I'm done reading it. But I did hear people say, I don't know if I'm going to, it was just like, what's going on here? And I don't know. I'm concerned that people are going to do that, and I think it would be a mistake, but...
How are you going to miss out on the book everybody's talking about? I mean, you got to at least stick along for the ride for that. And that, to me, is going to be... And I've got to believe there's going to be a payoff. I gotta believe there's going to be a payoff in this. I actually will agree with some of the concerns that there are bits that you're kind of like shaking my head on, and I'm scratching my head on a bit. I actually like that. I like that. Now, if I'm saying that same thing at the final issue, all right, I can follow that logic. But we're 2 issues in to an event that's going to be extending for months now. So I'm going to stick around for the ride. I want to see what's going on. And, I've got a funny feeling. But I like the fact DiDio didn't dodge this question. And I think that's part of the reason why he has been asking that questions at cons, because the story is a little confusing at first. He was implying that by the time we get into that lost month, after that, things are going to start, they'll start being established and less confusing. And I like that. I'm with you that one of the strengths of this panel was they didn't dodge anything. The question comes up, and this came up at a lot of panels that we've been at in the last couple of years. Orin, the original Aquaman, are we going to see him at all? And Ethan Van Sciver was chatting with Jeff Johns, whispering to him, and came back with Blackest Night, which I thought was interesting. The Spectre, Final Crisis Revelations, and we'll get to, I know you want to comment on this, the Greg Rucka and Philip Tan series, which this Philip Tan artwork, they are constantly talking about how great this artwork looks. I am really, really excited about this. When they were talking about the Spectre, Jeff Johns said, Blackest Night, and Jan Jones said, Tiny Titans. But when they were talking about the Spectre and what's going on with him, And then the Blackest Night joke came up again. Who are some characters, just talking about Blackest Night? Obviously, there's going to be The Dead Will Rise, is one of the main points of Blackest Night. And there was some joking around about Blackest Night throughout the panel. Who are some characters, Jim, is there a character you'd like to see appear in Blackest Night?
Well, actually, there's a couple characters I would like to see in Blackest Night. The Martian, if he is actually dead, would be kind of cool. One of the characters that someone did ask about, and they gave a maybe answer, was Earth 2 Kal-El, because they flat out asked, hey, is he going to be in the Black Lantern Corps? And they're like, maybe, which I thought was kind of like, ooh, that'd be kind of cool, dead Kryptonian. One of the other comments that they threw out, the question that someone asked, was they read on the internet that they were going to use R.I.P.
Grant Morrison's original plan.
Yeah, Grant Morrison's original plan was to use Bruce as the leader of the Black Lantern Corps, and that was the thing. Jeff's like, I never talked to him about this. I never even heard about this plan into it. So it was one of those things where, and that kind of spun out to another conversation about, hey, just because you see it on the internet doesn't mean it's true. This is one of those theories that someone threw out there. People I want to see involved in Blackest Night, which they did. I'm pretty sure in this panel, I know in past ones they've mentioned it. Tim Drake's family and/or friends. That would be an interesting thing, seeing Tim deal with the fact that with his his recently deceased family members. Of course, honestly, if you think about dead friends of Tim, first one that pops in my head is Connor. Granted they have the whole lawsuit, so who knows what they'll do with that. But he's another one I'd like to see.
Jor-El. That's who I'd like to see.
Oh God, dude. Only way I would say is how could they do that is because there is no body, and you need a body to have a Black Lantern zombie.
How do you know that?
Okay, I'm guessing there is no body concerning the planet exploded.
You misunderstand me. Where have they said they need a body?
Dude, I am the ace #1 zombie killer. I know to have a zombie, you must have a body.
When did they ever say they were zombies?
Okay, that's an assumption on my part. I don't know. It would be an interesting thing to see Jor-El, seeing Clark have to deal with that.
Thomas and Martha Wayne.
That'd be another one. That'd be a cool one. And I can't say at this point in time, later in the podcast, in this episode, I will throw out a name. But I can't mention it now because it's a spoiler for something else. So later in this show, I will throw out another name that I don't think would be, but I think would be interesting.
Okay, that's fair enough. I just because the Blackest Night kept coming up there, and I think it's a storyline that it's well developed. They're teasing it. When Bendis and Johns were having their debate at the panel, they talked about how they're very lucky with their contracts in the sense that they're able to tell long-term storytelling. Gail Simone wanted a long run on Wonder Woman, is hoping for a long, strong run on Wonder Woman for the purpose of being able to tell longer stories, developing longer stories, putting in these threads and things like that. So, and to me, as a fan, as a long-time reader, I have no problem with the writing arcs for the trade, but I've never been a big fan of the concept that you can't have a continuing story thread. Look how wonderful the Starman Omnibus is translating into a collected edition right now, which can be great for the collected market, but you're also having a continuing 80-issue run that's being put in there that was told in arcs way back in the 90s, even when it wasn't being written for the trade back then. So you can still, I think, do this writing concept for the trade, but have long-term threads running through a book. So it's the nicest thing about the Blackest Night is we're still talking about this storyline that's coming in 2009, and it's just sounding kick butt. So that's one of the things I wanted to, seeing as it came up multiple times in there. One of the things that was brought up was that Marv Wolfman never intended for Barry to stay dead, which was an interesting point with all the uproar over, should Barry Allen be back or not. To go back to the original writer of Crisis on Infinite Earths who did the actual deed, he never intended for this to be the case. So I thought that was an interesting point. Sean McKeever mentioned that the character of Bombshell in Teen Titans will be back in issue 63, not killed by Batgirl as previously thought. His enthusiasm about that book in general was, to me, really infectious, especially when talking about his Terror Titans arc and what was going to be coming out of that. He mentioned at one of the other panels, and at this one as well, that Ravager left the team, but Ravager would be back.
This was the whole Terror Titans miniseries and some stuff going on with Ravager, and they're like saying, well, will it be the Terror Titans versus Teen Titans? Like, no, Titans will be busy with other stuff, and they left it as that open-ended, like what are they going to deal with? They got some big stuff coming down the pipeline. And even when they asked about Robin, and they're like, Robin's Tim Drake's got some stuff going on, and there's some stuff coming down the pipeline for him too. And it's like they're teasing, and they're just getting me set up, and that's why I'm like chomping at the bit, saying how earlier when we talked about Kira, just about his writing for Titans, how he's getting his groove, he's getting his jive, and you just hear him and see him talking, and he gets that twinkle in the eye as he's talking about going, yeah, this is, and something cool is coming down the line. I'm really, really stoked for Titans coming up.
I know there was some concern over that too. When you were chatting, you were like saying that was kind of a spoiler that you weren't necessarily sure that you want to know about. Here's one of the things with me though. Just because she's back in the book post the Terror Titans mini, that doesn't mean that she's back on the team. Because that wasn't what he said. He said that she's back. I left it pure and simple for that. What does that mean? And what does that mean for the relationships of the team and how that works dynamic-wise? Maybe she will be back on the team, maybe she won't. That's not so much the concern of mine. It's always interesting to me to see what that journey looks like. It's not, how it ends, it's how did we get there. That to me is far more intriguing anyway. I'm very, very curious to see what that's going to look like.
Yeah, it's not the what, but the how and why that makes for really cool stories. I said it in a lot of past episodes. When they killed off Clark, the storyline was the death of Superman. So Clark dying by Doomsday was not a surprise. Yet, it was still a great, wonderful read that was very gripping and just powerful. And you're just like, oh, wow. Going into that final issue, you're still thinking in your mind, is this going to be a swerve? Are they going to actually kill him off? So just because there's something, you don't know everything, and it's the ride that is the entertaining part about reading this stuff. So yeah, definitely looking forward to more of Ravager.
Gail Simone started talking about Secret Six. First of all, she said that she can't reveal the two new members. The one was obviously a new creation that they made specifically for this book. If you look on the net, I'm not going to go into it here. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't see who the new member is going to be because it's been posted on the net, so I did see it. Somebody posted in our forum as well. I'm going to respect her wishes, though, in the sense that she just doesn't want it known right now, so I'm not going to reveal it on the podcast. But it is out there. I mean, it's easy enough to find, so I'm not going to ignore that either. And, you can easily, if you really want to know who it is, then go ahead and find out. But if the writer, to me, is saying that she really doesn't want people to know ahead of time because she wants it to be found out within the writing, I'm going to respect that. And I mean, I already know, so I'm not going to pretend I don't know. I know because I saw it in one of our forum threads that was posted there. That was slipped out at one of the, and Gail even mentioned that it was slipped out at one of the panels by, of course, Dan Dio. I'm very intrigued by the commentary on the new villain. Her exact words were, "The new villain is such a bastard that even I'm freaked out. I'm no longer interested in the A-list Batman villain. I want to know everything I possibly can by this new Batman villain who they're going to, it sounds like during a trip from San Francisco to Gotham, they find this person in Gotham, I'm guessing?"
That's how I took it. It was a Gotham trip where they picked up, and obviously my guess is the Gotham trip is to pick up the new A-list Batman villain. So naturally they'll go to Gotham to pick that person up. And then while they're there, she talked about this great fight scene that's coming up. That's in issue 2. There's a scheduled really cool fight scene, which I'm assuming is in Gotham. And if it's a Gotham fight scene, it's got to be involving Batman.
Well, they mentioned two characters with pointy ears and similar-looking costumes. So she was definitely hinting right away it's Catman versus Batman, without saying it directly. But, she wanted to tease it and all that because that's going to be a kick-butt fight. I'm looking very forward to it. The one of the people in the audience said, is he going to get to win this time? which I found very, very interesting.
Yeah, and I like the fact that somebody else, said they're glad she's doing what she's doing with him because they're sick of seeing Catman as a loser. And she's like, oh no, he's not a loser, and you're going to see a lot more of him making little funny jokes, which made Dan DiDio very uncomfortable.
I gotta agree with you. That was awesome. It was this whole panel. If you've never been to a DC Nation panel, and you're going to a convention, do yourself a favor and go to them. They're a lot of fun. There's a lot of joking. It's very light. When there's something that they really can't say because they're trying to avoid it because of upcoming storytelling, they have a real fun way of dancing around the issue and giving you every possible excuse as far as why they can't answering it and have a good time. They had, I should add right now that they had standing behind Dan DiDio, there were 3 girls who were dressed up as DC characters. There was a Black Mary costume, there was a Black Canary costume, and there was also a basically spoiler as Robin when she took over the role of Robin briefly, all dressed in the costumes. And he had them helping out with the people who were asking questions on the mic, because the question session, everything that I'm talking about right here, really came out of questions from the audience. So they went right to questions from the audience right away, which was really interesting to have those, what do you want to know right now? What are your burning questions right now? And they had a whole bunch of fun with that. The question came up with films, which it's actually an interesting question because it came up into our forum recently. And it's a very good point because, when the average fan takes a look at Marvel right now, Marvel's producing a lot of films. Marvel's also doing that very cool thing in the sense that certain characters, and I don't want to spoil this because I don't know what Marvel films our listeners have seen, but certain characters from other Marvel movies will appear in another Marvel film. And I'll leave it at that because I'm not trying to spoil anything, and I won't say what film or anything if you haven't seen anything. I'll just leave it at it's worth seeing the Marvel movies that are out right now for those type of events, and I'll leave it at that. But they were saying, with these stellar Marvel movies that are coming out this summer, what are you guys doing as a company to produce that? The DC Nation portion, what we're seeing right here, they are the publishers of comics. Because they are owned by Time Warner, Warner Brothers, film studios, they don't have any control or say over that. Warner Brothers has the first option to those movies, and that takes a long time. It extends their process of if Warner Brothers doesn't want to option them and they want to allow another studio to do that, it actually has to go through a whole process to even have that point. They're all about comics. That's what they said. That's their concern. They have nothing to do with that end of things. They have no choice on that end of things. But Bob Wayne actually, and it was actually a very interesting and compelling point. He said, hold on a second here. We've got a Spirit movie coming up. We've got the Dark Knight movie coming up, and we've got Watchmen coming up. So we have 3 very big DC movies that are coming up, which, you know what, I got to be honest with you, I was very much like the people in the audience that were bringing it up. I was thinking Dark Knight myself. I had blinders on as well. The second he said that, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's 3 very big DC property movies that are coming up. And that Spirit trailer, they were running that at the DC booth. That looks really, really cool.
Yeah, I didn't even know about the movie. And we're sitting there, we're standing in line to get some stuff signed by Gail Simone, and and there's a scene where the phone is ringing in the Spirit movie, and I looked down to my phone going, no, it's not my phone, and Sean's like, no, Sean's like, idiot, it's the movie over there. So I look over and I'm watching, I'm like, oh my god, the Spirit, cool. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It looks kind of cool. It's Frank Miller is doing the movie, and it has that nice Frank Miller, Sin City type of style to it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the trailer a great deal. It was funny when Bob Wayne said that, I'm like saying something like, oh, wait a minute, he's got a very good point. Those are 3 very high-profile films that are going to be coming out. And the Watchmen movie, everything I'm seeing from that is looking really, really authentic, from the casting to the costumes to everything. I've got my fingers crossed on that baby because everything I'm seeing right now is giving me more and more faith in that movie. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that faith is well deserved. But on paper and in presentation so far, what I'm seeing for Watchmen is giving me a lot of hope, and we're going to have a very stellar movie.
Yeah, amen on that. It's so far I've been doing a little bit of internet research on it, just looking, seeing what's going on. I'm confident. I'm comfortable with it. I think we're going to see a Watchmen movie, not a movie called Watchmen. So I'm looking forward to it.
A retailer came up, which was, I actually liked seeing this because it's interesting to see that side of it and what are concerns from a retailer, because as a comic fan, buy the books, I read the books, I enjoy the books. That's kind of my concern. I don't have to worry about selling them or anything like that. So a retailer came up and said, what are you going to do about Marvel kicking butt in sales? Very blunt, very honest question. Black Canary and Spoiler Robin were told to remove this person, and it was all done in jest and things like that. What I liked about that was Dan Adio didn't leave it at that, though. And his honest answer was, deliver the best books possible. As with a publishing company, what else can they do? I liked the fact that even though he made a huge joke out of the whole thing and had the guy removed, he stopped and said, now for my real answer. And I liked that. I was glad that he didn't just leave it at the joke.
Oh, definitely. And, I like seeing him go to bat for their properties. We've seen this before when, someone will throw out a negative comment about the book or something. In New York, someone made a comment about 1 year later. And he's like, 1 year later, that's 2 years ago. What the heck? And then he just went on and he had that same fire in this speech where he's like, you know what? All we can do is put our best work forward. This is all we can do. We are, doing what we can. And it's like that, I like that. I was like, he wasn't making excuses. He didn't say, hey, well, look at this. He didn't try to put a spin on it or do some, sneaky peek type of, flim-flam, bebop around, kind of like dance through numbers and stuff like that I've seen business people try to do, put a spin on it, saying, really, we're not losing money, we're making money. Yeah. He didn't do that. He said, this is what we do. We make comics. We make the best we can. We put it out there, and I'm backing our work. I'm backing what we do. And I was like kind of sitting there going, hoorah, Dan.
Yeah, that was a hell yeah moment too, because I like people when, especially in an art form where you've got a lot of people working for you who are, really batting really high right now. Forget the, a lot of the things like, let's forget Countdown and Final Crest. Let's take those out of the equation right now, which are two of the ones with the crazy internet buzz at the moment. Fine, take those out of the equation. Forget those two. Look at the rest of the companies out there. For any of you that are reading DC books out there right now, there is a lot of quality. We just did a Top Bullets feature where I had the toughest time in the world trying to make a top 10 list. Where it's a top 5 feature. I went and, then took some of the rest of my books and put them in order, which is in itself hard to do, to make a hierarchy of taking, 6 through 10 then and putting them in order as well. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted to illustrate just what a great month it was. And I really felt that if I stuck with my top 5, that I would be leaving out a whole bunch of great books that were not, like, maybe Trinity related, which to me right now the Trinity books are just hitting a home run, and then things obviously like Green Arrow, Black Canary, which I just happen to be personally really, really enjoying. It was great to see him speaking up for that particular output that's going on right now, because I really do think we're seeing a tremendous shift in quality. Forgetting those 2 books that have been kind of controversial, that's 2 books or not. Take a look at how many books that line's publishing, and they've got great stuff. I like that as well. Earth 2 Kal-El, when that came up, you mentioned that about Blackest Night. Art and Franco were hysterical, because as they started getting comfortable with the panel, they were shouting out Tiny Titans for everything. Like, Tiny Titans issue 11, he'll be there, which was great. There's just a few more things. More Elseworlds was asked, which I was thrilled because they said they've got a couple of things in production. So it'll be great to see more Elseworlds stories.
Yeah, I'm digging I dig the multiverse. I dig the 52. So, curious to see if this Elseworld is an Elseworld or if they say Earth 13 or Earth 23 or something like that. I don't know. However they do it, I'm happy with it because I like these alternate what-if type storylines.
They also made mention during the panel that only about half of the worlds have been defined, because somebody was asking, is there are these all mapped out, and can that be put online somewhere? I actually really liked the answer that only half of them were, and they were leaving them open, which obviously you're leaving it open to the creativity then of your creators who are sitting there and saying, hey, I've got this great story where if we do an Earth like this, look at the cool things I could do with that. I like that they're leaving their options open. That's what's cool about the multiverse. And then, as he's mentioned previously, all those worlds have alternate realities as well, which opens up a whole bunch of possibilities. I really, really dug that.
Yeah, and funny, as we're talking about, I remembered something from the John's Bendis debate, DC Marvel debate, whatever you want to call the thing. But so threw out a question to the panel because of the two different continuities and two different multiverse natures. Is there any possibility that we could see the Marvel universe be one of the DC Earths, one of the 52 Earths of DC? And of course, there's a lot of the Marvel people were booing it. I think some of the DC people were booing the comment, and the panel kind of were joking around a little bit with it. And it also opened up debates about different possible, story arcs and things like that. So it was one of those funny kind of notions. You just get thinking, would they ever think about doing something like that? Would there ever be a time when both companies would be comfortable enough to once again have a mega crossover event? And I gotta admit, I'd like to see it. And in the past, they've done like the DC versus Marvel. I'm always wondering, why are they doing it versus? Why don't they do the two teams together? Two teams fighting on the same side, fighting against evil. Kind of like a Secret Wars, but where it's the
JLA Avengers. I mean, and that's not really fair, because some of the crossover stories really have been where maybe there was a confrontation early on, but then the characters started working together. There's actually a history of crossovers where it's kind of the obligatory misunderstanding fight scene, then you work together and against common foes, which usually winds up being the villains of the respective characters, which it winds up with that kind of formula. So it's not really always a DC versus Marvel. That was a crossover that they did that was themed that way, DC versus Marvel. That they actually themed the crossover that way, but that's not always indicative of what their crossovers have been. They've usually been true crossovers, with the one theme that pretty much stands out, that there usually is a misunderstanding that leads to a fight.
Right, and I don't know, I'd like to see it, it basically is my point. I'd like to see more of the two different universes working together, throw out something. I always figured it'd be kind of cool if they both put out something and then donated the proceeds to charity or something like that, to make it more than just a out-of-continuity type of story, just a little fun thing for the different readers for both of the universes or whatnot. I don't know. I'd like to see it.
And I totally agree with you. I think what ends up happening is, a lot of times why the misunderstandings happen is usually one character is transported to the other character's city for whatever reason, and because they're like a fish out of water, it usually leads to an assumption that they might be a villain. So, that leads to misunderstandings and confrontations. I don't have a problem with that. I agree with you. I'd like to see those again, too. I'd like to see those, though, when the creators have a lot of passion for doing it. I think a lot of times there's crossovers just for the sake of doing crossovers. I think the best crossovers have been the ones where clearly the creators have had the passion for doing it, and the ones where they're kind of just being done to just do them because it's something that is going to make a buck, which that's the business side of it too. I think that gets lost. So I think there's creators who definitely have a storytelling way that they can do it, and I wouldn't mind seeing another one again. Nightwing is brought up, which Nightwing, for those of you that maybe haven't heard any of the DC Nation panels or the history, Dan DiDio at one point in time brought up the concept of Nightwing dying. And we're going way back to dying in Infinite Crisis, which was ages ago now. Basically, that was completely derailed because his writing staff and editors, everybody sat down with him and, basically explained the importance of Dick Grayson, his rich history, and why that character is so viable and why that's just really a big mistake to do that. He saw the light and wanted the character alive. What happened was he mentioned a story where they were at a panel, and every time he said Dick Grayson killed or Nightwing killed, there was this person in the audience who would scream. So they kept finding ways to plug it into the panel, and that's a consistent thing with their panels. When they find something that's entertaining the audience at the panel, they keep doing it because it's a lively panel and not afraid to do that. I really like that about the DC Nation panels, but he put it to rest and just said there is no corporate attack against Nightwing. He agrees that right now some of the best writing in ages is going on Nightwing, which I totally agree with. Peter Tomasi is really having a good run with this book. The stuff with Talia al Ghul, I think, is just absolutely fantastic. It's brilliant. Dick Grayson is Dick Grayson again. The sense of humor, the accessibility, the sheer coolness of the character. There is a coolness to Dick Grayson where you're like, oh, I'd love to be Dick Grayson. He's just such a cool guy. You know, the acrobat, he's going to try some things that Batman wouldn't in a way that's, he's got a style about him. That's what's cool about Dick Grayson. And, basically just said there's a major storyline coming with him. Let's put this whole thing to rest. There is no corporate hatred for Dick Grayson. There's big plans for Dick Grayson. So I was glad to see him kind of put that to rest, too, because it's kind of become tired at this point as well. Funny, but now it's over, done with. Let's move on.
Yeah, the joke's done, and it was funny while it lasted. It's still funny. I'd probably still chuckle if they made a Death of Nightwing joke. I'd probably join along in it, but yeah, you gotta dig the guy, and I'm glad to see that they are backing him, and I'm kind of curious, the major storyline. Of course, the first thought that always pops in your head is R.I.P., or is it something in his title? Is it something with Titans? Because he's got his team book. Where is the major storyline going to come from? I don't know. I think my answer is D, all of the above. I think we're going to see a lot of pressure on Dick in the near future, where each of his titles are going to have, bam, 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 be bopping around doing a lot of stuff. So I'm looking forward to it.
There was a thank you from the audience about Catman not being a joke. Gail Simone came back, well, I'm glad that you're seeing Catman as not a joke because you're going to be seeing him in nothing soon. She's having a great time with that character. There was a question about, and I actually really respected a lot the way this person said this. They were asking a question about the character of Dr. Fate, but they were stumbling over it a little bit because they didn't want to be disrespectful to the fact that Steve Gerber had passed away. And I really, when the person was asking the question, I'm like, wow, I can really feel this person stumbling over that because I'm in a similar boat where I'm like, wow, did Steve Gerber create a really cool character concept? I was excited for the Dr. Fate series. I was excited when I heard Steve Gerber was attached to it. When the mini came out in Countdown to Mystery, I started reading it. I was really enjoying it. The character concept just really started to grab me. And Dan DiDio gave an honesty, and I understand it. With what happened with him, they're giving it a little rest for right now. He did mention that, and it was nice and heartfelt because he explained the situation of what happened to Steve Gerber, was really trying to address it with the respect that it deserved, saying that the character will be appearing in Reign in Hell, and that it is, a character with a rich history in DC, so he wasn't, trying to in any way, shape, or form take anything away from that character. For me, I thought that was really professionally handled and with great respect for a great creator. So I thought that was a really cool moment. Ethan and Gale on some kind of Wonder Woman that they mentioned, that was it. There's going to be something going on. I didn't get an impression in any way, shape, or form it was meant as the main book, but I will leave it at that because there was nothing else said. It was brought up, I think, because Dan DiDio kind of threw it out. It was an internet rumor. And Dan DiDio threw it to Ethan Van Sciver. Gail even joked, saying, "You spoil everything," or something along those particular lines. But they didn't say what that project was. I would say by the fact that they said project, that means not the main monthly. That'll be interesting to see what that was. Supergirl, new creative team was announced. Sterling Gates with artist Jamal Igle, which I love Jamal's work. The important part that's going to start with issue 34. And with issue 34, you're going to want to make a note of this for anybody reading Action Comics and Superman. This is going to become they're working with the writer, both Johns and Robinson, to make this a big part of the Superman books. So you're going to want to note Supergirl issue 34. If you're not reading Supergirl and you're reading the Superman books, you're going to want to start reading Supergirl with issue 34 because this is going to be a part of a big Superman push.
Yeah, and couldn't be happier more. One, We're going to get some really, really awesome art from Jamal. I've talked about Supergirl, that I'm really liking the direction they're going. This is going to be a continuation, make her part of a... They're beefing up the Superman family, and I like that. And it's definitely a cool moment for me as well as anybody who's digging Supergirl.
James Robinson's name was mentioned, and basically a thank you for bringing him back, which I totally agree with, to the DC universe. Jeff dragged him back, is what he said, Jeff Johns, and he said just because he's so handsome. And I think it was really great because he was having a great time with that. But then he stopped and talked about the respect that he has for him as a creator, and I thought that was really cool. The question was brought up: are we going to see Lobo? The suggestions from the Tiny Titans guys were him being... Oh, no, I'm sorry. The suggestion from the audience was possibly as a Tiny Titans gym coach. And Franco and Hart said, well, we kind of see more dark side for that kind of role, which I thought was funny. But they said that there is a book that's recently started up that he will appear in. So I don't know what that was implying, but that's exciting to see that Lobo will be coming back on some level. Are you... Jim, I remember, you saw him in 52. You didn't know who Lobo was, I'm sure, before 52, or maybe loosely knew who Lobo was. Are you excited to see more Lobo after his appearances in 52?
If it's in Tiny Titans, then yes. Generally, no. He's not a character I was like, yeah, Lobo, all right, he's back, cool. When they used him, when he was used in 52, I liked the story. I thought it was kind of neat, just how he was and who he is. But it's not something I'm, gung-ho reaching for. And I don't know which one of the Tiny Titans guys, I don't know which one it was, I didn't catch, said that they also saw him kind of maybe being more like the shop teacher.
You didn't like him in 52 when he was going through that whole peaceful bit and everything like that? Then the main man turned on Lady Styx and everything? You didn't like that?
I liked it. I'm just not, gung-ho wanting to see more Lobo stuff. I see him as a good supporting character in the right style, in the right series, or you bring him in for a story arc, then he goes away. I don't see him as a long time pick up the monthly for him and say, yeah, I can't wait for my next Lobo issue of Lobo.
I wasn't implying for a solo book right now. I'm actually implying that I'm excited about the news that he'll be appearing in some title because I like him. I agree. Half the fun with Lobo is his interaction with other people because he can be a rather offensive character, which is one of the things I like about him. A question was asked about the Starman omnibuses with the success of this one right now. How often can we expect to see new ones? This actually kind of surprised me, and I think it was because the Fourth World omnibuses were released so close together. We're going to see one once or twice a year. They're going to do the entire series, which is their intention right now. But I liked the explanation why. It was mainly because of the fact they didn't want to. They wanted to get it in his hands of as many readers as possible versus scaring people away because of it. And I think there's a certain point to that because it's a pricier. Obviously, these omnibuses are pricier than your normal trade paperbacks. So that way, anything that gets Starman in more people's hands works for me. He mentioned that for sure, and he was kind of baffled that he was even asked, "Will the Shade miniseries been in there?" And he said, "Do you really think we would not have that in there?" The Hellboy crossover was mentioned, which I guess I was assuming naturally that wouldn't even be under consideration. His answer was maybe, and I'm speculating here, so please take it as that. And that's one of the things I think with the internet. The point was people are confusing internet speculation with cold hard facts. I'm a fan of speculation. You'll see me speculate on the forum all the time. A lot of times when people throw out comments that are their own speculation, I will throw in my own speculation, and the truth of the matter is we can both be completely wrong whenever you're speculating. I would not want anything that's my speculation going around the internet as a fact. So I think that's something that we all need to remember. And I'm not saying that anything of mine ever... I think people usually know I'm asinine and that... None of my speculations or my speculative musings are in fact. But I think that was the point that was on there. You've got to take a look at the internet with more of a critical eye. in the sense that if you see something on the internet and there's no professional backing to it, that take it with a grain of salt. Maybe read it for enjoyment purposes, maybe read it to enhance your own speculation, but don't necessarily assume any of that's set in stone. Question was asked, I really loved this question because I'd love to see it as well, finishing the Hitman trades. Bob Wayne said, we'll see what we can do, but he then added that he wouldn't be surprised if we saw it happening. That wasn't him confirming anything. That was more of an afterthought afterwards. I think because of Garth Ennis's name, that there's a good possibility we'll see the rest of those. So I was glad that the answer wasn't no. There's some of those where there's an affirmed or there's nothing in the works at this time. That means that there's discussions happening at least about it. The online comics question came up, and especially with they were hinting at Marvel's online service where you can go online at Marvel right now, pay a monthly fee, and you can read just a ton of backdated Marvel issues. And that's what Dan DiDio asked right away. He said, you mean with a back catalog? What came up was current issues. And then the CBR format came up, which, if you don't know what that is, for digital comics that are being, honestly, the digital comics that are being downloaded on the internet right now are in a format called CBR. It's one of those formats for digital downloads if you see them on the internet. It's a very popular format out there. And I should clarify again, not all of the CBR usage is illegal. There are comic companies now that are adopting free downloads or cheap downloads of their books as another way of distribution. There's actually companies that I've seen where they have a website right now where you can go to the website, you can pay a less than you would pay for the comic issue. I want to say it's anywhere from 70 cents to $1 for a download of the comic, and I'm just throwing this out there off the top of my head from what I remember seeing, so please don't quote me on that. They say that there's something out there, but they're not ready to put anything in place. That wasn't them saying that putting something in place at the moment. I would take it as a big company like that with online stuff being explored by other companies, they have to be looking at it. And I think that's what Dan DiDio was trying to say there, that they always are looking at things like that. But I think they're all concerned with the benefit of that versus potential sales loss. So it's an interesting debate because I do see both sides of that issue. I'm a big advocate for trying to get books in the hands of new readers. I do see both sides of it because I do think there is an audience that's left to be tapped there from the online comics. Lex's daughter they were really digging into some past history. Lex's daughter was brought up. Jeff Johns, actually, I was really impressed with some of the stuff Jeff Johns was rattling off there, showing his knowledge of Superman's history. He said, wasn't she at one point in time turned into a brainiac? And she came back with, well, but then they, undid that and de-aged her or something like that, or they, somehow it was undone. And then he comes back with, wasn't she living with the Contessa? And Tanatio, as Jeff was throwing these things out, he said, obviously by this, there are no plans at this time for that character. I liked that bit a great deal, though. Actually, it made me respect how much background knowledge in Superman Jeff Johns has, which I think is why we're seeing so many cool concepts brought in.
Yeah, definitely just sitting around the comic shop, talking about Superman, and it's that comfortable nature that he has with the character, and we've seen it when he talks about other DC characters, that he has this comfortable, flow with feelings for them, that I think it's part of just his passion behind the work, behind the character. Gail Simone's had that same type of passion with Wonder Woman, which is why we're seeing the great Wonder Woman stuff. She had that about with Black Canary, in Birds of Prey. And so it's when you get these writers, these creators, and the artists as well, who have this passion for what they're working on, is when you see the amazing stuff that comes through the pipeline.
Let's start my own internet rumor here. So you've heard it here first. Wally's twins were brought up. The question about their fate. And Dan DiDio said something like, and that was brought up, kind of foreboding. He joked around at first saying they'd be sent to Montessori schools. Ethan Van Sciver threw out that basically they were going to be going where, I think it was Ethan who threw that out, that they were going to be going where Nightwing is, because of the jokes about Nightwing before. But I took that to a different level. I took it as a part of Batman Rip. Wally's twins are going to be Batman. We are Batman.
We are Batman, and had the two of them, yeah. I was also thinking, What about Blackest Night, which I was surprised they didn't throw that out there.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what those two. Let's taking all kiddingness aside out of that whole thing, and that they're going to be a part of everybody is Batman now, because everybody's going to be Batman after the whole thing happens, except for Bruce Wayne. I don't want to see those kids die out of this. I've gotten to the point where I really care for them. I don't want to see them die. I don't think they have to in order to move ahead. What about, let me ask you a question. How would you feel if they did die? What are your preferences and why?
All kidding aside, I wouldn't like it. I've made my rants about little children in restaurants and stuff like that, but all kidding and joking aside, one of my least favorite things to read, hear about, see on the news or in stories, are children dying. And that's just something I don't want to see. You know, even if they age them and then kill them off, they're still a little kid to me. Personally, what I would like to see happen is the kids get de-aged back down. And once again, I hate de-aging stories, but this one, I want to see it. I want to see them get de-aged back down to being babies and be safe and not have any superpowers. If they have to get rid of them, that's how I want them to do it. Now, if they don't get rid of them, I'd like them to be at a nice age where they could join the Teen Titans and have them be a part of the Teen Titans, one or both of them, and use them that way with a nice stable power flux, not the freaky nature of they could age 20 years in a minute. But if they're going to get rid of the characters, I'd rather they bring them back to babies. Healthy, safe and sound, no nothing.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of them de-aging either, so that's not really something that I'd like to see. I'm more in the idea if they're going to take them out of the game, somehow make them powerless, and go that route. Maybe they're cured somehow, or something's done to them, so that way. Obviously, I think it's Wally's powers or the Speed Force that are somehow affecting them, so that I'm hoping that in some way that will be cured, if that's a possibility in the whole thing, and that they'll just be alive and we'll see Wally and Titans and their story's kind of done, if that's the way they're going to go. Also, I liked your idea about Teen Titans. I don't see them being on Teen Titans by any stretch. I'd like to see them go somewhere where they could still be alive somehow. Showcase Blue Beetle was asked about with the success of Showcase Booster Gold. Will we see a Showcase Blue Beetle? That's something that they'll definitely look into. Bob Wayne did throw out the Action Hero Archives, the original Blue Beetle, Captain Atom question are in there from Charlton. Does Ted Kord stay dead? Jeff Johns almost said to read something, and then and then stopped himself. So I don't know. I don't know. Let's throw it out there right now, Jim. Obviously, for anyone reading Blue Beetle, dead, not dead.
No. I don't think he's going to stay dead. We see in Booster Gold what happened when Booster saved him, because the whole rip in the time continuum and all that. But the one thing that Rip Hunter always says about how time, shifts and fixes and whatnot. What if there was another body to take the place of Ted Kord? So Max Lord thinks he shoots Ted Kord, but he doesn't actually kill Ted Kord, but he kills somebody else. Would that still fix the timeline because someone dies? Because someone who they believe is Blue Beetle dies, but Ted lives. So I don't want to spoil who I could think it. I think it might be, because that would be more of a Booster Gold spoiler, because there's one of the characters in the most recent issue of Booster Gold that I think could be used as cannon fodder for this purpose.
I personally think that he's going to wind up in the Martian Manhunter's body, and that's what we're going to see.
Okay, that's a theory. Not a good one, but it is a theory.
I'm joking. I don't know. I don't see him going in another body, unless it's somehow a clone of his own. I'm interesting. I would like to. Well, let me put it this way, Jim. How bad do you want to see him come back? Even with the whole theory, you think, I see, okay. Jim just showed me, well, why can't you say that? You can say that. It's speculation. It's not fact. We're not revealing, we don't know what do we know from anything. It's speculation. Go ahead and tell. I like your theory.
Okay, I just because we throw out spoiler warnings, but this is really a thing. But this is a general speculation. One of the characters that we're seeing in Booster Gold was another Blue Beetle, and he kind of turned on them and was a bad guy, was an evil Blue Beetle. And part of the story they're saying they revealed in Booster was about how this beetle, one of the reasons he turned on them was because he was told that if Ted Cord lives, then Jaime Reese would never become the Blue Beetle, and someone he loves would never die. And that's why he turned on them, to keep Jaime from becoming the Blue Beetle. Well, my theory is, what if somehow Ted gets this guy in his costume, or has it so that this is the guy who actually gets shot by Max Lord, and the bloody goggle is Boosters is forwarded onto Batman, and it starts that whole twist that they needed to get them to know that Max Lord's a bad guy and whatnot. So
I think it's a darn cool idea, but they better include in there a way to take care of the forensic evidence, because if it's Ted Cord's dead body, the Justice League is going to investigate it, including fingerprints and dental and all that stuff. And the internet would have an absolute field day with that if that's not taken care of. I'm all for what don't get me wrong. I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not saying I'm not for what you're saying, but I'm saying you better have everything taken care of for that one. I'd love to see him back, though, in any way. I love your theory.
They never found his body. They never had, only evidence, forensic evidence they had was the Blue Beetle goggle, which had the blood on it. And the blood was tested by Bruce, and it was Ted's. Now, in all the different fightings that's gone on in this Booster Gold thing, Ted's goggles have been broken. I am pretty sure, not 100% because I don't have the issues in front of me. But, so there is the damaged goggles that way. But the main reason why this whole time flux happened when they saved Booster was because Max Lord never killed Blue Beetle. He never actually did the deed, which never caused the whole shockwaves. So if Max Lord actually kills somebody that he thinks is Blue Beetle, that will start the shockwaves.
There was never a body found? I mean, that's going back a long way, so I can't honestly say that I 100% remember the reading of that whole thing. I don't remember them ever saying there was no body found.
It was Max ordered the destruction of the body. Somebody, I'm not exactly sure who, but somebody forwarded the bloody mask to Bruce. I think, what's her name? Sasha, maybe?
Oh, Sasha.
I think Sasha, yeah. I think it was Sasha was ordered to destroy the body. And she's the one who forwarded on the bloody mask, the Booster's mask to Bruce to tell him what's going on.
Yeah, you're right. The Blue Beetle mask was sent on. You're right. I do remember that now. Wow, that does open up some interesting possibilities. I wonder if the plan all along was to somehow leave open the option to bring him back from that. I don't know. The Silver Age series done by James Robinson was brought up to be collected. They said it's already been done in their eyes with New Frontier. They were talking about Bruce, does he need to be in Traction or worse, and all these big storylines, that he brings important elements to a story as a major player because of the fact of who he is and those type of things.
It was a cool statement about how Batman is one of those kind of guys where you can capture him, you can take him down, but he'll always figure out a way to overcome it. But it was a comment by Dan DiDio that kind of got quickly glazed over, where they're saying how Bruce has to be captured. He goes, or worse. Now, the only thing worse than being captured is probably killed. So was that him trying to get a little tease out there about R.I.P., maybe somehow tied into Final Crisis or whatnot? I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that either. Some of that, how much of it is him trying to drum up more speculation, because he's gotten really good at playing that game too. So that was interesting for me. One of the things that I always found as a strength of Batman, just touching on that fact that he goes through some of these horrible things that he goes through, and things that when we talk about Final Crisis, we'll talk a little bit about Batman in that particular storytelling as well. One of the things that's great about Batman is when he goes through horrible events, it shows his humanity and reminds us that he is a human who is standing toe-to-toe with people with the power like gods because of how well he has mastered and honed his body and mind as well. That's what makes him such a useful tool. His defiance in the face of overwhelming odds, even when he's at his lowest point, or he's at the situation is most dire for him. But his defiance and unwillingness to waver from who he is, what he stands for, and his beliefs, and not giving up is part of what makes the man who he is. It's what makes him tick. So I think that is one of the strengths in really great Batman storytelling, is when you see this is a guy who is human, and he's fighting against people who can have bullets bounce off them and things like that, but to be somebody that has to wear a vest in order to have that option to survive being shot at with bullets, it's a very different world that he lives in. And it's one of the things that I think he brings to the table that makes him so unique.
Oh yeah, 100% agree on that. It's definitely, and even we saw in the Marvel DC panel, a lot of them were commenting that Batman is their interesting character. Batman is, character they would want to work on. It's, and a couple of them said, hey, come on, you got to go with Batman. Yeah, he's a cool character.
We talked about different versions of Superman, including a post-crisis Superman, where they were just, one of the things that Jeff Johns is talking about is they're trying to bring as much as they can into their storytelling using all of the Superman mythology, meaning that just pulling from those elements and trying to bring them into storytelling, which Grant Morrison did a lot of that in All-Star Superman, even though that's not in continuity per se. He used a lot of the mythology of Superman, a lot of the things from the past of Superman, and it sounds like Robinson and Johns are going to do the same thing, which I'm really excited about. Jericho, the Titans member, was brought up, and this is where Art and Frank, I don't remember who it was, because they were on the other side of the podium because I couldn't see who was talking, but they're talking about, he's in Tiny Titans, which is true. He gets them out of class by taking over Deathstroke, and then he's pals with Wildebeest and all that stuff. And they said that he's going to be killed. He's going to be in Ethan Van Shriver's Darkest Night. And he was totally joking around and deliberately mispronounced the name to have a lot of fun over there. I really like those guys in the sense that it's, a lot of people will, I say, falsely criticize the DC Nation panels. Oh, they give out correcting information and things like that. There's a big difference between satire and having a good time and giving out false information and misleading your audience. I've never been to a DC Nation panel where I thought the objective was to mislead. I thought the objective was to entertain, get you excited, and get you talking. And I think that's part of the point of these panels, and this was just really a lot of fun.
And I add to that, I've never been to a DC panel where I didn't have fun, and I didn't laugh, and I didn't say, yes, this is a panel about comic books. This is a bunch of people, bunch of friends just hanging out, chewing just chewing the fat, just we're talking, we're having a good old time, and I like that. And it's that fun nature, just ribbing back and forth between the audience and the panel and the audience and whatnot. It's a groovy time.
They had a joke with plans for Robin. Sean McKeever said, see Blackest Night. Tiny Titans guys said, doesn't he die? Jan Jones, I think, might have said that on behalf of Tiny Titans, I don't remember. Basically, they're saying there's some changes in store for this character. So there's changes in store for Robin. What those changes are, I'm not entirely sure. That's interesting for me. I'm really, really excited for that. They talked about a question was asked about a comic tying into Mortal Kombat versus DC, and they said that they don't have anything planned at that this time, but it is a good idea. And I agree, a major video game like that would be something where it's a big, high-profile property. That would be an interesting way to get the video gaming audience to possibly start looking at comics more. They asked about a collection of classic tales of the Green Lantern Corps, and they said that's something that will be in the works. James Robinson feels that Jack Knight is done. They talked about possibly bringing that character back, and he feels his story is over and told. He does have another potential story, but that story is not one that would move him into current storytelling. It would be one told within that old storytelling. Captain Carrot number 5 was one of the people asking questions. Comic that got him started. First concept of serialized storytelling versus it being an isolated issue. He realized that this keeps going on. Zatanna's getting her own book, and apparently Captain Carrot's going to be appearing in her hat, which actually the excitement though, I didn't realize there was going to be a Zatanna solo series. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, and it was funny because I don't remember ever seeing a big announcement about it, and it was just one of those things where Dan was just talking, oh yeah, Captain Carrot's appearing in Zatanna's hat, and with her having her own series now, her own monthly, we may be seeing a lot of him. And everyone's just like, huh, what? And he just kept moving right along, and I was just like, oh, nice, just throw it out there, get the people talking. So I was like, cool.
Question was brought up, internet rumor of Linda Danvers coming back. Dan Dio clarified that he thought the book was going to be released this month, but the truth is Rain in Hell #1 is one where he'll answer some of those questions. Future Absolutes, they talked about Absolute Sandman 4, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, The Black Dossier, and Ronin, which are the ones that are a remainder for this year. Milestone is a part of the 52, which Milestone was an imprint that used to be part of DC. The answer is no. And Vertigo's, once again, no. Which I'm actually glad. I don't want to see every DC imprint a part of the 52. I don't think it's necessary by any stretch. So I was glad to see that. Amethyst collection. And here's where things got interesting. Person first came up asking about an Amethyst collection. Had a ton of buttons all over. So Dan went to go check out the buttons and try to find one for each of the panelists on there. Wonder Woman and things like that on the panel. So he finds one, and it's reading it out loud. I'm a fragile female, flower of femininity. Everyone on the panel started losing it, and even Dan DiDio really realized what he said, started busting up. There's actually more DC news. There were more panels held over the weekend, which we're going to put on next week's show. Because hopefully you're finding this interesting, because we're trying not to just report on the news, because you can find that stuff, as we've done before, on other websites. We're trying to give our own commentary, our own thoughts, and kind of bring you to the panel with us, versus just kind of regurgitating it. So hopefully that comes across in this episode. I'm never quite sure, as we're recording them, if you guys are getting that kind of enjoyment from it. So feedback's always welcome on that type of thing. We're trying to kind of expand upon the news versus just telling you what it is, because you can find this all over the place on the net. So hopefully you found this entertaining, especially considering the fact that Jim and I were wrapping this particular segment up at about 1 in the morning on Friday. And again, I flip-flopped a couple of the segments, and if there's some audio quality issues on this particular episode, it's because the entire episode, with a couple of tiny exceptions like these little bits, were recorded completely on an Iriver. So Jim and I were passing that back and forth, and I tried to edit out any possible crackling sound or anything when he and I were handing it off, at least the best that I could. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode and our discussion on Final Crisis #2.
Holy caffeine!
Just really quick, our sponsor for this episode was somebody we actually got a chance to see on the show floor again. That's Cameron over at In Stock Trades and DCBService.com. They are wonderful people. Reminder that Teen Titans #62, regularly $2.99, is only $1.79 with the 40% off discount. Wonder Woman #23 is regularly $2.99, only $1.79 with that 40% discount. Why the Last Man, the deluxe hardcover. For any of you that haven't checked out this series and want to see what all the hubbub's about, $14.99, a regularly $29.99 hardcover, 50% off, only $14.99. It's a great chance to jump on board that. Whatever your bag and boarding or shipping preferences, DCBService.com is your discount pre-order source. And keep in mind that coming over this week, they should be putting up the new books. So check out what the next specials are going to be, because there's always those great 75% off specials which you can jump on, and there are good reasons to be shopping at DCBService.com if you're not already. You still have time to order Seven Soldiers Volume 2, which is 47% off, which is going to be a great discussion with everything that's going on with the New Gods and the fact that we've seen some of those characters now in Final Crisis. Why the Last Man, the final trade paperback, Volume 10, Whys and Wherefores, regularly $14.99, 40% off, only $8.99. We had the chance to chat with them, as I mentioned, at their booth at In Stock Trades at Chicago. They are just wonderful people, proud to be supporters, and we thank them for supporting us. We want to remind everyone about the Hero Initiative, heroinitiative.org. They are at all the major cons, and please consider donating to them. Even just the cost of a comic book helps them out. If we're all doing that, if 1,000 of our listeners donate the cost of a comic book, we've donated $3,000. So that's nothing to shake a stick at. So please consider doing that and making that donation to help somebody out. We saw so many wonderful people, and I'm not going to try to go through them all on this particular episode, because Jim and I we need to check out. We probably are going to get thrown out in a few minutes because it's Sunday morning, and we want to get this episode recorded so I can get it out to you tomorrow. I want to thank thank Gail Simone and her husband Scott and all the people from the You'll All Be Sorry message board. We had a chance to have a wonderful dinner with them, and it was great to hang out with all of them. We met people both who were on the board and people who weren't on the board who were just wonderful people to chat with, and it was just such a nice, pleasant evening. Art Lyon and Gene Ha, Brian from CGS, and Chris, the Around Comics guys, for inviting us over and treating us to a wonderful evening of recording and then going out to dinner. So many listeners: Greg, Nick, Mike, Neil, Mark, going out, and I'll go on the next episode a little bit more detail about them. I recorded a lot of them. Jay Scarzy, as I mentioned, I'm sorry I missed him. We played cell phone tag in a place where we couldn't get. We actually literally, I would leave him a message, then he'd leave me a message, and you think we would have been smart enough to come up with a meeting place, but we didn't. Freddie Williams II was great to see him and his wife Kiki. Mike Norton we ran into, Sean McKeever, who hosted the podcasting panel, which was just, to me, a wonderful experience to be a part of that. I'm trying to think of Ethan Van Sciver we got to chat with a little bit.
Of course, our buddies, Art Lyon and Gene Ha, just had a wonderful breakfast with them, and they also, a couple times we'd run into them and we'd chat a little bit. It was just a really just fun, just interaction with some really cool people. It was definitely, this con for me was really different than the others in that it wasn't just about shopping, and it wasn't just about going to panels. It was about interacting with people and just, hanging out with, friends and, and whatnot. It was a cool moment.
I want to shout out all the podcasters on the podcasting panel, and there's a reason why I'm saying that so generally. I recorded 3 times this wonderful little speech where I was, talking about all the podcasts that I listened to on the podcasting panel. The reason why I recorded it 3 times, every time I would record it, I would remember somebody that I left out. But then the problem was we also ran into podcasters on the show floor and in that panel that were not on the panel. So then I started shouting them out as well, and I started realizing, well, then I'm always conscientious of the fact that, geez, if I leave somebody out, it's going to look like I'm slighting them or something like that. The best thing I can say is the podcasting panel was recorded by our friends over at Around Comics. I'm going to link to it and announce it on the show when it's released. I think they said it's going to be sometime next week, not this coming week, but the following week. The second that is up, you'll find out who everybody was that was on the podcasting panel. And honestly, the best thing is you'll get to hear them speak for themselves. You'll get to hear some of my comments about comic book podcasting. So I think that's the best way that I can shout it out. One thing in general that I can say about this con is you run into so many people here, and I know I'm leaving names out, and it's definitely not for the purpose of, it's the fact that we're really scrambling at this point to kind of get all this in. But that has been the pure joy of podcasting, being a part of a comic community of fans who are just enjoying this, is the fact that when you go to these cons, they're no longer isolated events where you go with a couple of people. You run into familiar faces. You meet new people who you've connected through forums. This hobby is now a shared community-based hobby, and that's, like you said, Jim, one of the advantages of being able to talk about books of like Final Crisis and things like that is you can do that with so many people through this, and it's one of the things that I really enjoy about being a part of this medium. It makes it worth the effort that we put into recording this, and I appreciate all of you taking the time to listen to these recordings that we put in and finding some value in them, because that's what keeps us coming back every week, and that does mean a tremendous amount to both of us that you do that. So we will see you next week. We're going to try to maybe sneak something in before next Sunday. I don't know how possible that is because we've actually got a number of recordings that we have to do this week, but we'll definitely be back next week. Next week's episode's a little tentative, so check on the forum. It's based on our recordings, when we get certain elements recorded. There's definitely going to be more stuff from Wizard World Chicago. There's a lot of news coming out of here, so you can definitely bet on that. We're definitely going to be doing stuff about the DC Crisis panel, getting to things that we didn't necessarily cover in the DC Nation panel, because there's a lot coming out of that as well. That will be for sure on next weekend's episode. Other than that, we're going to definitely have comic book content. It's either going to be Starman Wicked Inclination, or it's going to be some of the stuff we were talking about with Birds of Prey and Teen Titans, which we're going to cover the issues that we announced previously, 118 and 59 respectively, but we're also going to do a Speeding Bullet style for the issues that have come afterwards to chat about, where the events go afterwards, and that'll be more of a Speeding Bullet style follow-up to those issues. So we're going to keep those conversations current. We're delaying them, but we're not ignoring them. So, and then we've got Trinity coming up and Seven Soldiers coming up and just a whole bunch of stuff to discuss. So we will see you next weekend. Bye! that they kind of both I'm here at the airport in Chicago with Jim Sagulin, and we were just talking about bridges again, as we always do whenever we travel anywhere. And, one of the things that I was curious about is walking bridges. Jim, do you have a phobia of walking bridges? Well, you let me know that one of the reasons why you don't have a phobia of walking bridges is because of your, of course...
my cat-like reflexes.
That's right, because you decided that if a walking bridge were to collapse, you knew exactly what you would do. You had two choices on what you'd do.
Well, you got a couple options. First off is the tuck and roll, which is the standard. That's especially the best option if it's like an open-air bridges, because you just absorb the shock and whatnot. Not a big deal. Now, with the closed-in bridges, like the walkways at the airports, you got this is a little tricky, and this is where the cat-like reflexes of mine come in handy. You have to, at the very last possible moment, right as it's hitting the ground, you have to jump. That way you're not on the ground when the concussion hits. Now, if the walkway bounces, you're going to have to keep repeating multiple rabbit-type hops.
Have you ever done such a thing?
Well, I haven't had to yet, but I have practiced.
Is this like a fire drill?
Well, you got to practice for all scenarios and all situations. You got to be ready. Be prepared.
What other things should you be prepared for that are equally as odd?
Let's see here, zombie attacks. I have a nice little contingency plan laid out in case, the world were suddenly turned into zombies, my survival tips. Max Brooks actually wrote a nice book about survival zombie training manual. It's a really cool book. I recommend that one. Let's see here, what other odd things?
Do you have like a zombie panic room in your house?
Well, see, that's the key. That's the biggest room. People think, well, I'll build a panic room. No, because all that is you're just giving the zombies a place to go for a free meal. You got to keep mobile, but you can't keep mobile using a car because cars run out of gas. So you got to think bikes, because especially now, if we're going with traditional zombies that are the slow-moving, bikes work. Now, if you use the 28 days later zombie, you're screwed. Just grab your ankles and say goodbye, because that's it. Because those dudes run faster than I do, and they run me down, literally.
Wow, you've really thought about this well, haven't you?
Yeah, and you have your little survival pack with some food in there, got to have a little change of clothes in it. You want to carry lightweight object, aluminum bats are probably your best bet, but if you got a nice, good, solid, sturdy sword, that's a cool thing, because you got to do the damage to the head.
Nothing nerf covered.
No, nothing nerf covered. Definitely not that, Machetes are another nice thing. Two nice, good, solid machetes. Because you do one in each hand. You do like a chop to like the arms. Because if a zombie can't grab you, they can't really bite you as well. Then you take the head with the third swipe. So, you gotta practice that motion. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. You
have like a training ground in your backyard for just such a thing, don't you?
Well, it's no longer allowed to be in the backyard because the neighbors were complaining. So I've converted the basement into a nice little training room, and you got to be prepared for these things. You never know.
You're like the Buffy of our podcast.
Okay. I would have probably preferred the... I don't know.
I like Buffy.
Because I just know we're going to get Where's Whatnot Now. I know we're going to get that.
That's why I'm sticking with Buffy.
Okay.